no one could ever define for me the word God.
Can I speak on Hayek religion, Mr. Moderator? Speaker prerogative. So Hayek was an agnostic atheist or whatever, but he did say if you're gonna go religious, you might as well go with the cream of the crop Christianity, the Church of Rome, Catholicism. If you're gonna do it the right way.
Don't be an Orthodox. I mean, the Orthodox is, I think.
He was not he's Austrian, so he's Catholic. Or well, apparently, Adam just reminded us that he's the only non-Jew of the Big Five. So as an Austrian,
the Big Five. The Big Five were.
The Big Five were Mises, Rand, Rothbard, Friedman, Hayek. So, I mean, if we're talking, I mean, if some people might say that the Big Five were Zionist.
Rothbard wasn't a Zionist.
But I mean Zionist in the dog whistle Zionist.
Right, but Rothbard was definitely an anti-Zionist.
But he was a Zionist, if you know what I mean, bro.
Oh, okay, all right. This is your anti-Semitism coming out.
No, not my anti-Semitism. I'm mocking other people's anti-Semitism.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's so meta, dude.
Meta, bro. And then you got Rothbard, who's like, let me go to the Strom Thurmond rally and
Oh my God.
Maybe your only Strom Thurmond supporter in the Bronx.
Oh my God, the Strom.
So are you the Catholic or is your wife the Catholic?
I am a disbeliever. If you want my story, and I'll ask the newspaper story if I can. I have a Roman Catholic mother and a Lutheran father.
Okay.
And I would say I was predominantly raised Roman Catholic with a secondary membership in my father's church, but I was certainly welcome and familiar in both. And I left both in adolescence.
Proud atheist?
Proud enough. You know, not too cocky, but a disbeliever. And you know, Uncle Friedrich, like I said earlier, nobody could define for me. Every time I had a question, no one had a good answer. How do you define God? Because if you could not define God, what is the rest for? Or something to that effect.
But you didn't have the opiate of the masses, which is what the communists, that was the whole...
I am all about that, like, feed that into my veins.
Give me them endorphins, yo.
I want that Eucharist in my...
I have a personal question for you, David, which has nothing to do with the topic.
Okay.
There's a man who I'm kind of scared of, who is kind of looming around. His name is Thomas Pynchon. Have you read any of his books?
I have not, but
I've
thought several times recently I should because of what people say about it, but I haven't.
I don't know if I need a brain transplant before I try to
I think it's Pynchon, but I don't know.
Pynchon.
He's
Okay.
well thought of.
Well, he's got that movie now,
You know, the thing is, I used to read bags of fiction, but recently I haven't read any. I mean, for the past 30 years I've hardly read any fiction.
Oh, okay.
And whenever it comes to reading some fiction, I start, there's something much more urgent that's non-fiction I have to read. And so I tend, but
there are 24 hours in a day.
Pynchon, I've been told, is so brilliant. And I have seen an interview with him on YouTube, and somebody else going on about how great he is. And he does sound as though he's not politically correct. So that's always a good thing.
No,
Yes.
but what Adam very truly said that alluded to the movies.
Make sure
And
I've got
so-
both your emails.
I copied them on the last...
One battle after another was
Nice to
based
meet you,
on
Gabe.
one
Good
of his
night.
novels.
You better
So
come
his
more often,
novels
dude.
get translated
I want
into
to.
movies.
It's a great time.
But a director has a right to have his own script and his own screenplay, even if he's adopting. But I don't know. I was wondering if I would need another brain transplant to read Thomas Pynchon, because I heard that.
I think he also writes in a way like Larry McMurtry. He writes in a very non-specific, standard
By all means,
English.
and make sure I have your email.
I don't know if you ever, not Larry McMurtry. Who's the guy who wrote Blood Meridian?
McCarthy.
Cormac, he writes in a very Cormac McCarthy way,
Okay.
non-standard English.
He's not James Joyce though, like James Joyce is like,
Well, he was an Irish Catholic, so.
Yeah,
but James Joyce, stream of consciousness.
Well, I mean, James Joyce wrote some very non-stream of consciousness things to start with. Like, there's a famous collection of short stories called Dubliners, and they're just short stories.
Any good?
And then,
Any good?
yeah, they're good. And then there's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man,
Infamously.
which is not stream of consciousness. It's only Ulysses which is stream of consciousness. And then, of course, there is Finnegan's Wake, but that's...
Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man does have a little, it isn't
Yeah,
super
a bit.
accessible.
There's some, you can, but I mean, basically, it's traditional novel writing,
Okay. So
autobiographical novel
the
writing.
ultimate answer is that you have not been exposed to Pynchon.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Or was it sure?
I mean, I ought to read some because some of these people, because I've been thinking recently about the development of culture over the centuries, in the last few centuries in Europe, and it's clear that poets and novelists, have a big influence on the way ideas evolve. You know, I mean, if you just look at theoreticians like Rousseau and Marx and people like that, you're missing a great deal, because a lot of what's going on is in the arts.
Well, and then specifically what I had mentioned was cinema. So I watch a lot of movies, Justin watches a lot of movies. There was one movie called One Battle After Another. The director is Paul Thomas Anderson, who is a substantial director, and he had done another movie which I hadn't seen yet, which was also an adaptation of a Thomas Pynchon novel. And yeah.
Right.
But that's an interesting point about the poets and novelists. Because at one time, poets and novelists used to like have much bigger impact on society. Like,
well, you know, Shelley called poets the unacknowledged legislators of mankind.
I never heard that.
I never heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard that.
That's because they are unacknowledged.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you miss a lot.
That was during the Romantic era, though.
The Romantic era is sort of the turning point of European civilization, you know. I mean, it's a huge thing. By the way, I have to completely change the subject.
Which I did to you, so that's fair.
Yeah. Lisa's away for a few days, and so instead of watching some, what we do is we watch old British crime dramas. And currently we're watching It's Father Brown, which is totally ridiculous. It's Father Brown. It's Father Brown, who's a Jesuit priest, set in England, and later than G.K. Chesterton set him in the 1950s, and it's full of historical gaffes and mistakes. But anyway, I was just rambling around online, and suddenly this movie appeared, and I thought, well, what's this? I'll watch it, and I watched this movie. Have you ever heard of this movie? It's called Lucy.
With
It was a
Scarlett Johansson?
Yes.
Yes, I've seen it.
no. What
do you make of it?
Who's the director?
I don't remember.
I
thought it was fun, but like, you know, what are some big intellectual takeaways from it?
Right,
I don't know.
I mean, the actual intellectual underpinning is suggested rather than spelled out, and what I suspect that it just won't hold water at all. But what a move for sheer quick impact and startling, startling effect. What a movie!
Yeah.
And there is a Lucy 2, which I haven't seen yet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like I don't know, 10 or 15 years
She can
later.
act, Scarlett
10 or
Johansson
15
can
years
act.
later, they made a sequel. By the way, it's impossible to make a sequel because, as you know, the ending of Lucy is such that no sequel is possible.
Right.
But anyway, there is a sequel, which I look forward to. But anyway, I was completely unprepared for that. I thought I'll watch this for 2 seconds and see what rubbish it is. But then I was absolutely gripped, you know.
It was an enjoyable movie. It was kind of a cool premise. I think it takes the
And at the beginning, in the first half hour, you sort of, oh, I see now, and then suddenly you disabuse of what you thought you saw. Yeah, which is the way it should be.
there's a couple of movies like that where it's like the human there's some kind of intervention or something happens where the human just transcends and becomes like a superhuman.
Right.
You know, Lucy is one. Way back in the day, if you remember, Lawnmower Man,
Vaguely,
which I think was based on a Stephen King story or something. But like, Lawnmower Man was one, and there've been any number of them where it's like, you know, you get this sort of like escape velocity of just continuing to evolve and get more intelligence or power or whatever. Because one of the things you'll use your intelligence to do is to grow your intelligence so that it becomes you know.
Yes.
But I thought Lucy. I thought that was a fun movie. I enjoyed it. The question would become like that blue rocky stuff that dissolved in her system. Like, would that become like the most valuable compound on the planet?
Well, if you can just churn it out in a factory, then presumably it wouldn't, because it would be cheap to manufacture.
But see, that's the thing is, that's one of those like.
But you can't have everybody doing that.
That's exactly the point. Is it's probably one of those things like, you know, you hear those urban legends, and they're probably not all legends; they're probably real. But hear those urban legends that, you know, some brilliant inventor, you know, finds some kind of something, and then they get a knock on the door from the people in the black suits. You know, like, you know, we were never here. This is ours now. We'll give you a check for whatever, and you keep your mouth shut for the rest of your life. And the whole point is, they've discovered something, or they've built something that the deep state has discovered that has such profound implications. If it, you know.
Yeah.
So that blue rock stuff would absolutely be in that category. As soon as somebody in a position of power saw what that stuff was, the factory wouldn't be churning it out and mass producing it. They would be using it for themselves or for, you know, select, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, if it has that impact on an individual, then they wouldn't be able to control the outcome if they started giving it to people. So,
yeah, that was a. I thought that was a good movie. There's another one that she did that is only minor surface level overlap, but there's a movie called Her.
Oh.
And
how wonderful. Oh. And he can act.
It's Scarlett Johansson as.
Anyone want cookies to go?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I've had too much carbohydrate.
It's Scarlett Johansson as an AI, with an AI voice, and this guy played by Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with the AI, and I believe the AI is self-aware, so it is a kind of AGI, but. You know, eventually that falls apart because she's just continuing to develop and evolve and stuff like that, and then, you know, he can't keep up, obviously. I thought that was an intriguing movie, but no, Her was fun. I thought that was just a fun movie.
I'll have to watch that.
I really liked that movie.
Her?
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And he was very convincing, I thought. Joaquin Phoenix was very convincing. And he was in another movie, The Master, and I liked him in that movie too. Of course, I also love Philip Seymour Hoffman. So
I heard that for that movie Her, I heard that Netflix is going to do a woke adaptation called She Her.
Pass.
You mean she/her?
Right, pronouns. I know that was really bad.
Well, they could take a step back and call it my pronouns.
Oh, it sounds so intimate. My pronouns.
You missed your calling as a writer, David.
Well, I've written some stuff.
I mean, as a screenwriter, yes.
Oh, yeah.
My pronouns. Oh my God. So what is, before you take off,
Yes.
because I can't remember, so what should be done in Minnesota? Because that's what's on the top of my mind at the moment.
You had that's a brutal video. The killing of the nurse is a brutal video. And I thought it was so intriguing because it set the Republicans against gun owners because they tried to do this whole, well, he had a gun. And then the concealed carry people said, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. He never showed his gun. He never pointed the gun in your face. The guy had already grabbed the gun before he was shot. You know, because the people who are carrying concealed, they want to protect I have a right to carry a gun. And so they're going to protect Petrie, the nurse's right to carry a gun. And so that was so interesting how politics makes strange bedfellows and how the Republicans actually turned against the gun lobby or set the gun lobby against them. Brutal, horrible video. It was right with the Kent State, you know, and the woman, when the guy just got shot. Just terrible turning point.
Do you think it was, because I haven't, there was a narrative that came out about that the dude who got shot, as opposed to
Of course they're going to do opposition research, yes.
No, my question is...
pedophile who tortured puppies and had sex with apes, I'm sure.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. But, so there was the narrative that came out, and then it turns out that, because the narrative that I heard they wanted to frame it with was, here's this selfless nurse, in the healing profession, and he was just there trying to help a woman and all this kind of stuff. And then it turns out that in a previous encounter, he was kind of a dirtbag who was, he spit at ICE and was, very aggressive with them in a way that, these are crimes you're committing. This is beyond the realm of protest. And so it's that there should poke holes in the narrative that he was just some selfless, Mother Teresa type.
In the video that I saw of the actual shooting, he had carried the cell phone in one arm and had his other hand up in the other arm, and I didn't see any spit. And this video is going to be micro dissected by everybody, but
yeah. That's part of the problem too, is you can Monday morning quarterback that all day long.
Yes.
But ultimately...
Look here, I know what it is to be unemployed, and I understand the ICE agents can get part of their student's loan, come back and get a good income, and I'm somebody who needs an income too. I understand that. I understand from the ICE, this is one shit job, but god damn it, it pays well, and I can at least get out of debt from it. I get that, I don't want to be an ICE agent. I mean, that's just, it's tough.
I don't want to be an ICE agent either.
But the fascinating thing to me was how the Republicans turned the concealed carry gun lobby against them. When they tried to do that one thing. Well, he was carrying a gun. Then the gun people went up and said, and that was his constitutional right to carry a gun.
And then that kind of just ended the whole argument right there.
You want to pick a fight with me? I'm the NRA, you dumb bastard. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, David.
Okay. Have a good one.
But a couple years ago, I was reading this one novel. It's like a Scandinavian Arctic novel with a libertarian bent. So it's pretty interesting. And this book, it was written by an American, lives in a cold region in the U.S. I think maybe in the Northeast. But this writer, he made a reference to the Craig Lockhart Hospital. And I did some research. It was like an actual hospital in the UK, and they'd use it to institutionalize dissident poets. like during World War I, there was some that were institutionalized, and then Ezra Pound, the American poet, he was institutionalized for about 14 years after
World War II.
Because he
admired Mussolini.
Yes, because what he had done, he was an American poet, and he did radio broadcasts for Mussolini during the Second World War, and he got arrested by the military in 1945. They tried to try him for treason, but he got acquitted on a technicality. So then they figured, oh well, since he did stuff for Mussolini, he must have been crazy. So they put him in a lunatic asylum for about 1960 or so. And then they released him, but at one time, like poets used to capture the public imagination. Just, but hardly anybody reads anymore.
Not only that, but like a lot of poetry is this bogus slam poetry where if you just put enough emotion and inflection into it and make it a melodramatic performance on stage, that's somehow...
Yeah, but there's always been very bad poetry. I mean, I don't think that's the explanation. It is interesting. I mean, I think that part of the explanation is that recorded popular music has taken the place of poetry. And Taylor Swift understands this, and she keeps referring to herself as a poet. And she does fulfill the role, although it's a bit unusual because her audience seems to be confined to women. You don't often meet men who really like Taylor Swift. Right?
I like her songs.
I mean, they are, in a way, poetry. And they have many of the attributes of poetry. But certainly, if you look at the 18th century and the early part of the 19th, or even the later part of the 19th, but especially the early part of the 19th century in Europe, I mean, including the United States, other outposts of Europe, poetry was big in a way that Taylor Swift is now big. You know? I mean, it was that big. And this lasted almost up to the Second World War. And there was a time when a new poem came out that was by a great poet and that everybody recognized. There were unrecognized ones, of course, that took a while to get. But when you would have educated young people would chant these poems because they all knew them off by heart because they'd read them so many times, and they would just chant them. And I mean, that happened with Byron, it happened with Shelley, it happened with Keats, it happened with Wordsworth, it happened with Baudelaire. And it happened in the early life of T.S. Eliot.
From St. Louis.
This is very strange. I mean, I've never read much about the life of T.S. Eliot, but he was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And if you listen to him reading his poetry or just talking, there's many recordings of him, you would swear, and I know about American and British accents, right? You would absolutely swear that he was born and raised in the home counties, somewhere like Sussex. And not a posh accent like from an English public school, which you could understand, but a sort of upper middle class, unpretentious accent, you know. Nothing, not the slightest trace of anything American. No, not the slightest trace.
We're still on the record, right? Just so you know.
What's that?
We're still on the record.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
What do you think of Starmer? Is his name Starmer?
Yeah.
What do you think of him?
I don't think about him much.
Okay.
But and I haven't studied him, but he seems a right piece of work.
Yeah.
A complete jerk and hopeless.
Oh,
but I mean, everything about Europe, including Britain, is depressing and sad, and the end. I feel it's all coming to an end.
And like what end?
Well, the end of everything that was distinctive about European civilization.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, it seems to be coming to an end. I mean,
everything that happened before Hayek got into the ear of Margaret Thatcher. Just joking, I'm being stupid. I'm making a joke.
There's more and more of that Budweiser.
So you're pessimistic on the outlook for European cultures and civilization?
well, I mean, it doesn't look good, does it?
Nope.
I mean, first of all, there is this economic collapse that's coming because they're all these European countries, well, not all of them, but they've got this EU structure set up so that it is dictatorial, you know. And people like Ursula von der Leyen, they're just so empty-headed, you know. There isn't much there between here and here. You know, they really are thoroughly stupid. And look what they're doing. You know, they're passing more and more severe regulations against importing Russian oil. In other words, they're saying, we want to go back to the Stone Age. We want to destroy industry. What? What's that about?
There's a few conspiracy theories out there that speculate that it's not stupid. There's one person, I forget who it was, some quote somewhere that I heard recently of someone that's, I think, current. If somebody is smart, is doing something stupid, they're doing something else.
I used to think this. I used to come up with all kinds of ingenious ideas for what Trump was up to, but I'm more and more becoming convinced he's just an idiot, you know. With a few tricks, of course.
I mentioned in my talk tonight that on Twitter that the Constitution of Liberty became a meme. But another thing that became a meme was the Twitter account for the Ways and Means Democrats, which shared a meme of Trump refusing somebody handing him the book, and the book was Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. This is Democrats. Are there free market Democrats? Is the Democratic Party have this tendency within them now?
Well, they used to. But
Well, I mentioned Matthew Iglesias earlier. I'm saying the Ways and Means Democrats. I mean, they're as much as I think this trolling is stupid, you shouldn't do it. Like official government communications shouldn't do it. But for better or worse, Trump has thrown us into this thing, and now now the Democrats are throwing Thomas Sowell at the Republicans. And if the Democrats are doing that, is that indicative of a contingency or a tendency within the Democratic Party that is pro-free market, pro-Thomas Sowell? Are Republicans or free market folks moving into the Democratic Party to oppose Trump on these means? I don't know.
Where did this happen at?
I think it's reading.
On the, like I said, the Twitter account for the Ways and Means Democrats shared a meme of somebody giving Trump
Thomas Sowell's
Economics, Basic Economics, and he refuses it. No.
Is it that meme where it's like Trump's head is superimposed on the Drake template or something?
No.
Okay.
It's like Trump's head is on like a 50s stereo, like Norman Rockwell-esque ideal of like a father in the 1950s.
Gotcha.
If I share the meme, you guys might be able to.
It could be, as you're speculating, maybe they're discovering Thomas Sowell and free market economics and stuff like that. Maybe, Or maybe, and I don't have an opinion one way or the other, I don't know what's more likely than the other, or maybe they just saw that there was a book called Basic Economics, and all it is the Democrats are just throwing shade at Trump for not knowing basic economics, and Thomas Sowell happens to be the guy who wrote a book literally called Basic Economics.
I mean, that could be the case, but what your hypothesis is complete speculation, and is predicated on that they just don't know what they just Googled basic economics and they picked the one.
Could be.
I mean, if they were to Google a book on basic economics and that's just the first thing that popped up, you would think they may have Googled the author, right?
I don't
Nah.
know.
Maybe not.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
I doubt it.
I do think there is I went to a meeting the other day of the New Liberals. There's a Chicago chapter. I mean, most major cities have their own chapter, but they have a central chapter in D.C.
What is New Liberals? What is it?
Neoliberal. They're called the Center.
Is it a
Center for New Liberalism? And they have chapters throughout the country.
Sounds like a very centrist type of project.
They're basically the free market Democrats, or the libertarian-esque Friedman. I've been to their meetings several times over the course of a few years. They are very open to Hayek and Mises. Friedman. If you can have a contingent within the Democratic Party that is pro-Hayek and pro-Friedman, hell fucking yeah. Even if you don't agree with the Democrats, shouldn't there be at least a libertarian or free market caucus in the Democratic Party that promotes Friedman and Hayek?
Well, it sounds too good to be true.
It's not too good to be true. It exists. I told you. I went to their meeting this past week.
The question, maybe it exists, but the question is, to what extent does it exist? How big?
I already told you the Ways and Means Democrats shared this meme. You're speculating that it's maybe they just Googled basic economics.
I have that book.
I mean, basic. Maybe you're predicating your skepticism on that they just don't know who the fuck Thomas Sowell is. And I think they do. And I think there's lots of Democrats who know who Thomas Sowell is, probably probably agree with a lot of his economic theory, especially in the age of Trump, where Trump is not popular. I mean, we can look at polls. He's not popular. And even principled people who support free markets and capitalism are probably in that group of people who don't agree or who think he's not doing a good job governing. So it does not surprise me that there may be Democrats who, hey, Thomas Sowell's cool, or hey, the Center for New Liberalism. I'm going to go to, like I said, I went to their meetup, the other day. There are pro-free market, sort of Friedmanite, Hayekite Democrats. And I support that kind of caucus within any political party.
I mean, there might be something to that, because wasn't there, there was that book by, I forget who the co-author was, but it was two of them. It was Ezra Klein and somebody else that wrote a book called Abundance, and people started calling themselves and referring to themselves as abundance Democrats, and so
I'm unfamiliar with this.
So yeah,
I don't know Ezra Klein and all that. I've never read the book. I've never heard of this.
The
self-identifying.
The coolest thing, and you always wonder how much of it is staged and how much of it is actually real. But I remember seeing a clip of, you know, because like Jon Stewart, he's back at the Daily Show, but he also has his own like podcast that he's like in an office or something, and he just like does Zoom calls with people or whatever. And so he has this podcast he does, and I think one time he had Ezra Klein on the podcast, and Ezra Klein, I think at that time was, you know, promoting that book Abundance, and Klein was trying to get through, not like as if he wasn't getting it, but he was conveying to Jon Stewart, like, the process might have been, I don't remember, but it was something that you know, normal people would consider rather not, you know, like super out there. It was mundane, like to get something done, you know, like maybe getting a permit to build something that, you know, like, okay, you know, that's not like, you know, a big deal. And Klein was talking to Stewart about all of the things over the course of years, the layers of permit approvals and licenses and impact studies and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and you got to get this certification and all that, all the bullshit red tape, as like, this is why you can't get that rail going from whatever it is to San Francisco or whatever in California. That's why you don't have as many solar panels, even though California is known as like the hippy-dippy, you know, where all the tree huggers are. No, where you see a lot of solar panels is in Texas, because they let you do it, because they don't have the same, you know, gobs and gobs of red tape that are weighing people down. And so Klein is, you know, giving a specific example of the amount of approvals and the cost, the running cost it takes to get whatever this project is done, or maybe it was like to remodel your house or get a new roof or whatever it was, or build a bathroom, who knows. And, you know, Stewart does one of these, like, he rocks back in his chair with like a double face palm in like just in incredulity at just the sheer ridiculousness of the whole process, that you just can't get anything done. And this is because of Democrats and their regulating, and we have to have this regulation, that regulation. They're always fond of the regulations. And so if there is some kind of movement like this this liberal something that you're talking about, maybe part of them is inspired by this abundance stuff that Ezra Klein put out not too long ago. Like, and you know what? If and I remember somebody reading something somewhere where some of the things that the abundance book was talking about, and they were saying like, wow, Klein and whoever the co-author was, wow, these guys sound like libertarians, because they're talking about all these things that are...
This is all news to me, actually. This is all news. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this recording so I can...
Yeah. Look up, I forget, you know, Klein, especially Ezra Klein and Jon Stewart, whatever their podcast was. I'm sure you could type both names and it'll probably pull it right up on YouTube. Look that up. And, you know, and they were hawking this book. And there were a lot of things where it's like, yeah, this is something that libertarians have been talking about for quite some time. Good job catching up, guys. You know, and so the thing that I worry about is, you know, if the, you know, liberals or the Democrats or, you know, whatever, that they are going to get the credit because they wrote the book Abundance that got all this mainstream, you know, circulation and press and all this kind of stuff. But it's really just cribbed from libertarian and basic conservative stuff about, like, you guys are regulating too much, you guys are ridiculous, your taxes are bullshit, you know, all this kind of stuff. But somehow a Democrat might put it into a book, and now it's a serious thing that everybody needs to pay attention to. And then they're going to associate that with Democrats instead of libertarians or, you know, free market Republicans.
As a libertarian partisan, I wish the Libertarian Party could have Ezra Klein and whoever else join the party and, like, make their book be a libertarian thing.
I think they're...
But, excuse me, let me finish. But even if they were Democrats and they espoused a libertarianish argument for whatever, and these libertarianish arguments became associated with the Democratic Party, wouldn't that be awesome?
It would probably be better than where we are now, because, you know, heavily libertarian style arguments or whatever, they're not that much a part of the mainstream. You might have a few people like a Rand Paul, a Thomas Massey, or whatever, but like, so to the extent that getting into the Democratic bloodstream means you're getting more mainstream circulation, then I'd say that probably is an improvement from where we are. But an improvement over that would be if it flowed through the Republicans instead. And
well, it's not going to flow through Republicans because the Republicans are illiberal now. The Republican Party does. I had mentioned earlier Thatcher banging this book. This is what we believe. The modern Republican Party wipes their ass with the Constitution of Liberty. Sorry, it's true. And if
more so than the Democrats?
Well, if me and you are agreeing that there's a future in the Democratic Party for pro-free market, libertarian-esque arguments, then who gives a shit? I mean, let's think about it. The Republican Party under Trump is very unpopular. So, yeah, you probably do have a lot of free market-minded people who aren't Republicans or not, like, support Trump. And if we're going to talk, we talked about the second best thing all night. What's the second best thing to the party of the people in power? The Democrats. So if you get a bunch of free market, Hayekian, Friedmanian folk who want to influence policy within the Democratic Party to make them less socialist and make them more free market, hell fucking yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. My only question is, would it happen and to what extent? Because the thing I worry about is, okay, so maybe they cherry pick a few things, like reluctant, disillusioned communists gave up centralized planning or something, but like maybe they recognize a few bits and pieces here and there, but they don't actually take in the deeper, like, libertarian principles that undergird it all. And so they'll still be very anti-libertarian in a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so maybe the Democrats can, the worst for me would be the Democrats, like, somehow take up just enough of the libertarian stuff on the economic side that, like, it attracts people and whatever, but, like, the Democrats are still going to be shit on things like free speech and free association, which, I'm going to be honest with you, I would probably hold those in higher regard than, GDP line goes up. Because, we removed a few regulations because somebody read Abundance or somebody signed up for whatever. What's that party called again? Or what's that group called again?
Center for New Liberalism.
Center for New Liberalism. Okay. I just worry that they'll use.
Am I right? I didn't double check on it. I have to double check.
Yeah, it's Center for New Liberalism. I just did some.
So I was right. I didn't fuck it up.
That's the name of the group.
Center for New Liberalism. Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure I was correct. Thank you, Mike, for
that's the thing I worry about, because, like, the current Democratic Party is very anti-white, and especially anti-white male, anti-heterosexual Christian white male. Like they hate people like you and me, and him.
How do you know that to be true?
I mean, that's like. It should be common knowledge at this point. Like, what do you mean?
I live in this city. I am a libertarian. Let's just assume that I am a libertarian who lives in commies Chicago. I do not feel that I am inhibited in any way because I'm a libertarian or believe in.
So I read something. I had my own visual representation of this, and then that somebody preceded me, and I think it was Rosa Luxemburg, who said something like, if you never move, you never see your chain, or you never see that you're chained, or something. I'm paraphrasing.
You're chained?
If you don't move, you don't know that you're being chained.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. Metaphorically understandable.
If you're not running up against the bars of your cage, you may not even know you're in a cage. So just because
So what did you run? What did you do to run?
So just because you don't feel it doesn't mean it isn't there. You might want to take a look at. I haven't. It's on my docket of things I need to go through. There's another very viral piece in Compact as a interesting, like, couple months later follow-up to Helen Andrews' Great Feminization. A different person writing on a different topic. Jacob Savage wrote The Lost Generation, and it's a long piece about how I think it's more geared towards maybe, the creative sectors of the economy or, society or whatever, that white men were just locked out. They were just locked out.
White straight men.
I mean,
they were locked out. So, like, if you, they're talking about things like, like, I think somebody even remarked about how, like, Disney would encounter screenplays written by white people that were undeniably superior to the diversity-produced screenplays, but they didn't go with the superior ones based on merit because they had the diversity thing. So, like, you may not feel it, you may not recognize it, but it's there. There's a book that a buddy of mine has started reading called Unprotected Class by Jeremy Carl, and it's an entire book about how whites are systematically discriminated against and oppressed. So I don't see that kind of thing changing in a more economically libertarian Democratic Party, because the way I would speculate it would shake out is the more economically libertarian, because maybe one or two of them read Thomas Sowell or Abundance or whatever, they'll say, cool, let's reduce the regulations on our favored client groups, but we'll still totally support DEI, anti-white discrimination, and so these kinds of things won't trickle down to everybody.
You're assuming a lot of things that's just going to happen.
It's not an assumption. It's inductive reasoning based on past positions and policies.
So if the Democratic Party, based on past policies, were all of a sudden, like, pro-slavery, because back in the day they were pro-slavery, does that mean that you can think they're going to be pro-slavery in the future?
Well, no, but for decades they've been economically leftist, just very, very liberal, for the center for new liberalism.
Actually, I think they've been very Hayekian, quite frankly.
But they've been, just with big spending, high taxes, high regulation, they've been very supportive of that. I've looked at the website for the Center of New Liberalism, and it's essentially rephrased leftism. That's what I found. They're really big in the global warming stuff.
Have you been to one of their meetings?
No, I haven't.
I have.
Okay.
I've met these people.
Okay.
So
maybe they believe in global warming. Maybe they believe that you should tax carbon.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very libertarian.
How is that any different from saying Milton Friedman saying that we should have a land value tax? Or if we're going to have just taxes, a land value tax can be the thing. Or is it even different from saying Hayek? How is it different from saying that Hayek says government should foster welfare for people?
Yeah, see, we have to go case by case.
Right.
Land value tax, maybe Milton Friedman wants to tax the rent seekers because they're not contributing to the economy. So taxing them is not hurting the economy, actually it's a little bit like justified. Like we have to go case by case. What policy that Milton Friedman espoused, or policy he thinks a great idea. I mean, case by case.
See, economics has taken a little bit of a back seat in my, constellation of things I care about, because I'm seeing things that are much more urgent and pressing. Like I can think about, the toe that I stubbed, but if I have a broken leg, I need to worry about that first. Or, I can worry about, X, Y, or Z, but if I'm tied, like an old-timey cartoon, if I'm tied to the railroad tracks and the train is coming, the only thing I care about is that train and getting off the tracks. That's the only thing I care about. Even if, there's a military conflict 10 miles away and I'm in danger, the train is coming right now and I need to worry about that right now. And as far as I'm concerned, the things like anti-white discrimination, anti-white racism, mass immigration, and demographic replacement, these are the things that matter to me the most right now. So if the line go up, economic libertarians are getting happy because there might be a cohort of Democrats who are maybe picking some of this stuff up. Okay, great. I will put stock in it as being important when they will acknowledge the other stuff that I just mentioned. The things that I just mentioned are the things. If you would have talked to me 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have even been on that wavelength. But it's so in your face now that you can't escape it. Jacob Savage talks about it. Jeremy Carl talks about it. It's everywhere, and especially from sources, and especially from
he's a very sharp mind who comments positively on the issues of the day.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, he is.
He's like a little bit gayish kind of guy, but he's sharp.
All right. For the Center for New Liberalism, I was looking at their blurb on climate. We believe that climate change is one of the most pressing issues facing the world today. Efforts to reverse its effects must be global in scale, rather limited to individual nations.
Oh my God.
Sounds very Misesian,
Right.
actually.
We support renewable energy of all kinds, including nuclear. Government placing a price on carbon.
I already mentioned the carbon tax earlier.
And policies that promote decarbonizing our economy.
So Mises was pro one world government.
How? When?
The book Liberalism.
So he promotes one world government from liberalism?
You want me to give you the page number and shit?
Okay, so fine, Mises did, but do libertarians do?
Well, if Mises is a libertarian...
No, just...
No. I mean, what is a libertarian? Libertarian is a word that human beings invented. It can mean basically anything, whatever human beings wanted to believe.
Right, so you're not going to answer the question.
No, I'll get there. Okay, well, ask the question again, please.
What do libertarians believe about setting up a world government and, for example, a global tax system that he's almost certainly...
I would say that most Libertarian Party activists, Adam, me, Gabe, are not pro one world government.
Yeah, it goes against libertarianism. That's centralized.
But does it?
It doesn't. It goes against...
But if libertarianism is just an appeal to Rand, if libertarianism is an appeal to Hayek, if libertarianism is an appeal to Mises, if libertarianism is an appeal to Friedman or to Rothbard, then it would follow that one world government is perfectly within the okay realm of libertarianism, because one of the Big Five spoke pro one world government.
Yeah, I think that...
But that's not what... But libertarianism isn't merely an appeal to those figures.
Define libertarianism.
Yeah, can we think outside the box, evolve or even invent our own libertarianism? Why do I have to stick to the Big Five?
You don't.
It's the line of thinking is like religion, it's like Catholicism. Oh, well, this apostle, that is Jesus Christ, that sort of... Do we have to follow this kind of thinking? Line of thinking?
To a certain extent...
Can you begin to...
That's a question.
Here's the thing.
A question.
Here's what I think. If you can make a libertarian argument for X, then make it, and it can maybe be a libertarian argument. Hayek made a libertarian argument for the Constitution of Liberty in his book. If enough libertarians think that that's a good policy prescription, then I guess maybe does that make it libertarian?
I think you have to develop whatever the libertarian political system or philosophy is, and then you check what people say or propose. You check it against this libertarian philosophy, and see how well it matches up.
How many people do you think? How many people do you think are pro Hayek versus pro Rothbard? Do you think there's more Hayekians than there are Rothbardians?
In the general population?
Yes. Why? Better persuasion?
Well, I mean...
Better ideas? He got his word out? David, go ahead.
Hayek is a recognized scholar with a big following among right-wing intellectuals. Whereas Rothbard, there's a naivety about Rothbard, and not many outstanding scholars respect Rothbard.
I don't respect Rothbard. To the degree that scholars would either.
I mean, he's not as bad as Rand. I'm talking now about the perception of him by educated people. He's not as bad as Rand. It was just hopeless. But there's a similarity in the sense that the people who, I mean, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but the people who follow both Rand and Rothbard are people who are not at the top of their profession. You know, both of them have a kind of amateurish quality. I'm talking about how it appears now, right? And I think that amateurish...
Rand sold way more books than Rothbard did.
Right, but
I wish I could have the numbers.
To non-academics, non-intellectuals, people who knew nothing. That's the point. I mean, and Rothbard is sort of intermediate. And this sort of, you can say it's a matter of snobbery if you like, but sometimes snobbery and actual quality coincide. And I mean, Rand is someone who doesn't have a following among real intellectuals, real academics, scholars in the area. She just doesn't have a following.
I think that Stephen Hicks may be a point in the right direction.
Well, he's one of the rare exceptions. He's a rare exception. And
certainly more than when I was like in my early 20s.
Hicks is a remarkable phenomenon because he is someone who has been teaching philosophy for decades up here in Rockford. It used to be called Rockford College, it's now called Rockford University. I presume there's some threshold you have to pass. But anyway, I mean, and Hicks is by no means an idiot. I mean, Hicks is, knowledgeable.
He's probably got bad reasons for hating
Kant.
Kant, yes.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. This is how you know that Hicks is a born-again, true-believing Randist, is because of his line on Kant. Because nobody in a million years would ever arrive at those conclusions about Kant, who knew anything about Kant. And Hicks doesn't know much about Kant, and he doesn't know much.
Rand didn't know shit about
Rand
Kant.
knew nothing about Kant. Rand was a total incompetent when it came to intellectual history or philosophy or anything like that. But I mean, but the point is, this is okay. First of all, this is not a totally isolated phenomenon. I mean, think of all the polished, respectable scholars who believe in the story of Adam and Eve because they're born again Christians. There are such people, and this is what you've got with Stephen Hicks. He takes a view which is normally only taken by thoroughly ignorant people, but he is not ignorant, and that this occurs. You do get people who are, you get a cultish movement which is founded by someone who doesn't know anything, Rand, and then you get someone who is much more qualified than Rand, a much better educated person than Rand, who is an adherent of that, and no doubt would be outraged at the suggestion that Rand is a total amateur and incompetent, but she is. So what, this happens. I mean,
is this how Marxism persists?
No, I don't think it's quite the same. Oh, it could be, but I mean, this is an interesting thing. I mean, people become converts to a belief system, and it's love. Maybe it's love at first sight, or maybe it's not, but it's love. They've fallen in love with the belief system, and I've seen this many times. I mean, when I was 10 years old, my father suddenly became a born-again Christian, and I was suddenly plunged into this world of evangelical Christianity, and I'm thoroughly familiar with it, or at least familiar with it as it was in Birmingham, England, in the 1950s and 60s. And we went to church, an evangelical church, and so I met lots of people who knew about this stuff. So I'm complete, and believe me, if you go to church 3 times a day on a Sunday and at least once during the week, every week, and occasionally for other exceptional appearances, you get to know it. And I wasn't permitted to drop out of that. My parents made me go attend all these things.
Your father and your stepmother?
My father and my wicked stepmother, yeah. I wasn't allowed to say, oh, you can do something else on a Sunday, we're going to church. No, I had to go with them.
Low church, sort of like
it was an evangelical church. Well, you see, my father, this is one of the interesting, do you want to know this? I mean, I don't know whether you want
I'm curious because I kind of want to know how
my father,
what's his dick who started the Methodist Church, the Wesleyan.
Wesley, yeah.
I want to kind of know how Wesley probably Wesley probably had a great influence on your father, right?
No, I don't think my father.
Or Schofield, did the Wesleyans have any?
The Schofield Bible had a big influence, as it did on many people who came to Jesus, had a born-again experience in the 1950s and 1960s in Britain. And they were very similar to people who were doing the same thing in the United States, although, of course, there were far more of them in the United States. Although, it has to be said that the whole story of US evangelicalism is in large part a story of the American South. The United States had within its borders a third world country, which we call the South. And that was the stronghold of evangelical Christianity.
By evangelical, you mean Protestant, decentral,
by evangelical. Okay, I've got a formula. I have a formula for everything. I mean biblical inerrantism plus born-againism. Those two things make evangelical Christianity. And
so the Catholic Church had nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it whatsoever. Oh, well, the Catholic Church was just a domain of Satan. I remember, in fact.
You don't believe Satan exists, though.
I don't believe God exists either. But I did believe in both for a while, briefly, when I was 12, 11 and 12 years old, 10, 11, 12 years old. It's a very definite belief system, right? And it's somewhat complicated by the fact that there are dozens of different evangelical churches. Now, what happened to me was this: my father suddenly had this born-again experience, and he gave his life to the Lord, turned to Jesus, became a born-again Christian, and he knew something about evangelical Christianity because there was some of that in his background in Scotland. My father was Scottish, and it was a feature of Scottish men in England. They were always called jock. Like that meant.
So if you don't mind me interjecting for a second.
Yeah.
Was the Protestant evangelical ethic in Scotland influenced by the Presbyterian Church?
Yeah. But I mean, and by the Baptist Church. But I mean, but the thing is, if you're a born again evangelical Christian, all these denominations are a little bit artificial. Mm. There's only one church, and that is the Church of Born Again Evangelical Christians, and they may be in 100 different denominations, right? But there's still one church. And that's all those who are true born-again Christians. They are the church. All other Christians are fake Christians, right? Who are not part of the church. So my father knew about this from his background, but he was never convinced when he was young. And then life moved on, and he met a woman, and they had a child. Or they had two children, me and my big brother, who I never knew after I was 1 year old, because we were separated, because my father separated and divorced my mother, right? And he married this other woman who was I call my wicked stepmother, just to have a Jungian archetype. But actually, I don't think Jung had the archetype.
Was she really wicked, though?
She was wicked, yeah. She was wicked because I didn't like her. But anyway, so I remember this very, very distinctly. And my father had some of this from his Scottish background, but that was 300 miles away in Edinburgh, and we were in Birmingham in the centre of England. So he had to find a spiritual home. So he went looking, and he took me with him. And there was a period where there was petrol. Gasoline in England is called petrol.
Yeah.
There was petrol rationing because of the Middle East crisis, right? So this would have been the Suez crisis of '56, right? When Israel and France and Britain decided to make trouble in Egypt because Nasser, the head of Egypt, had nationalised the Suez Canal, which had been a British thing. Mm-hmm. So France and Britain and Israel got together, and the whole France, Britain, Israel thing, believe it or not, was scuttled by the United States, who at that time was not firmly under the control of the Zionists, obviously, because they scuttled this whole thing. And it led to the disgrace and resignation of the British Prime Minister, Sir Anthony Eden. And he was succeeded by Harold Macmillan, right? Now, so my father, because of the petrol ration, we had a car, of course. In fact, prior to becoming a born-again Christian, my father's religion was cars. He was obsessed with cars.
Worked on them? Like, was he like, he knew how to mechanically...
He built a car. I mean, it was basically an engine and chassis of an Austin 7. Mm-hmm. But he made the body out of aluminum hemispheres, quartered, and put on the corners and so on. Anyway, he was
an artisan.
He worked in a factory, but he was actually a glass factory, made glass things, but he was obsessed with cars, and when he became a born-again Christian, cars largely went away, not totally, but two things that were part of his life suddenly went away: alcohol and cigarettes.
Does that make the Christianity conversion worth it?
He'd been a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker, and that all suddenly stopped because he got a new drug, Jesus. Anyway,
would you rather have Jesus or alcohol or tobacco?
I think on the whole, it's difficult to be sure, but I think Jesus had a kind of civilizing impact because being a drunk, it does give rise to. There's a cost to that. There's a cost to any of these things.
Oh yeah, if you're drunk, you gotta get drunk every night.
But anyway, so because there was petrol rationing, my father got a motorcycle, and I sat on the pillion, which is the back seat of a motorcycle. It's called the pillion. When he drove out in all different parts of Birmingham looking for a spiritual home. So he went to all these different evangelical churches to find the right one. And first of all, we went to the one we sort of ended up with for a while. It was a gospel hall which was run by the group that was known as Plymouth Brethren, right? Their name for themselves was Christian Brethren, right? But they were known as Plymouth Brethren. And by the way, what's his name? The guy who invented the rapture and all that,
Darby
was one of the founders of Plymouth Brethrenism, right? But anyway, so we went.
So they had an influence on modern evangelical eschatology.
All these evangelical churches had somewhat different little bits of them. And the thing that was distinctive about the Plymouth Brethren was they were against having any paid ministry. So there was no pastor, there was no minister. People who gave the sermon was just any member of the church who, they didn't even call themselves a church. Any member of the assembly, which of course is what church means.
In Greek.
Church means, well, no, it would be ecclesia in Greek, but church is in German, Kirch. Anyway, let's not get into etymology. The point is that that was one of the distinctive things about the Plymouth Brethren. They did not have a paid ministry. Now they did have a diaconate. You could be elected to the deacon of the church, and after a couple of years with this particular, and all their churches were called Gospel Hall. That was the name for all of them, as far as I know. Certainly many of them. So my father, my wicked stepmother, and I went along every Sunday to this Gospel Hall, which was a Plymouth Brethren thing. And then my father fell out with the rest of the diaconate, and I don't know exactly over what. But my father, a bit like my real mother, who I didn't know anything about at this point, because the fact that my wicked stepmother was not my real mother was kept from me, right? But my real mother was a real troublemaker. My wicked stepmother was not a real troublemaker, but my father was a bit of a troublemaker, right? So anyway, for one reason or another, my father fell out with the diaconate of this Gospel Hall, and then we went to a different evangelical church, which was a member of this little denomination called the FIEC, Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches, and it was a church that was very near where we lived, even close. They were both pretty close, but this was even closer, and it had a paid minister. So it was more like a conventional church. But it was the same theology, exactly the same. So, I mean, you have to understand, in an evangelical church, for example, there's no altar. You're making a faux pas if you refer to the communion table as an altar. That's a Catholic kind of thing, right? So
there's in other Protestants, but yes, you're right.
Right,
generally.
right. So all these things are a bit different from what you think of as Anglican Christianity or Episcopalian Christianity, which is the American name for Anglicanism, because they don't want to be associated with the British, right? Or didn't want to.
During the Revolutionary.
Immediately after the Revolutionary War, they wanted to not to be say we're Anglican, so they said we're Episcopalian, which simply means episkopos is the Greek word for overseer,
bishop,
which means bishop.
They're pretend Catholics.
So one of the things my father found out about this new church we started going to was that at least some members of this church believed that the church would go through the tribulation. In other words, they didn't accept J.N. Darby's dispensationalism. They didn't accept that. So they didn't accept the rapture. But I think there were other members of the church who did. But so they didn't have a line on that. Whereas the Plymouth Brethren, they were all Schofield, J.N. Darby. So my father, when he got involved in being a born-again Christian, he got this Schofield Bible, which has got in the running heads and the little notes, gives a dispensationalist interpretation, which is very peculiar in the history of Christianity, because Christians, the general view of Christianity before J.N. Darby, there was somebody earlier in history, but anyway, the general view was that the Christian church was the new Israel. And so all the promises of God to Israel were cancelled and were given to the Christian church, which was the new Israel. But J.N. Darby took seriously the text that said that God made an eternal covenant with Israel. So in other words, they took the view that if you were a Torah-observant Jew, you might still go to heaven. I mean, they did want the Torah-observant Jews to be converted to Christianity, to accept them as...
But if they hadn't, they still might have a shot.
I'm not sure exactly what the line was. It's subtle. But the point is, the traditional Catholic view and the Lutheran view and the Calvinist view, none of this applied, right? Basically, Jews had lost all favour with God. The new Jews were the Christians. That was the view that Christians, overwhelming majority of Christians, held before the 19th century. And anyway, so my father eventually started falling out with people at this new church as well, but he never made as far as I know, he never made the break. So that's what happened. So, but the actual theology that was preached is pretty much identical, whether it's FIEC or Plymouth Brethren or any of 100 other evangelical churches. It's the same theology with a few minor differences here and there. Some of them are differences relating to church government. So that was the story. So I was thoroughly involved in evangelical Christianity. At first I believed in it. I gave my heart to the Lord and all that sort of thing. And then over the next year or so, I backed away from it. I thought this is a lot of nonsense. And so I became an atheist. So I was an atheist by the age of 13. So I beat George Orwell by a year because he became an atheist by the age of 14. But anyway, so I'm thoroughly acquainted with all that stuff, and this is old style evangelical Christianity. Now, part of what was going on at this time was the Billy Graham Crusades. Mm-hmm. And Billy Graham, in the United States, of course, had these monster rallies and brought thousands of new converts into evangelical churches. And he was non-denominational. And he said, go and join your local church. But he meant your local evangelical church. Now, of course, in the history of Christianity, there have been lots of churches which have begun as evangelical, and then they've sort of diluted and modified. And this has been looked at by various sociologists and so on. And generally speaking, once you have a paid ministry and you have seminaries, and people go to seminaries, something happens to them, and they start to moderate. And so there is a guy, what's his name? I've forgotten his name now, but there is a theorist about this who says that there's just successive waves of evangelical Christianity, because what happens is you get an evangelical church, they decide to have a paid minister, but the only people who are good enough to be paid ministers are people who've been to the seminary. At the seminary they learn Greek, and they learn that a few things they used to think was very simple and straightforward are not simple and straightforward at all, right? There are questions raised just by the unalterable facts about the New Testament, right? That give you cause for concern. And so they start to moderate. And that introduces, and then what happens is that church evolves into being less evangelical. Either they compromise on born-againism or they compromise on inerrancy, one of the two or both. And so what happens, you get a new denomination of evangelicals that starts to have revival meetings and taking away people from those old things. And so that happens. So, you know, in the time when you had what was called the Great Awakening, which was a big evangelical revival, the guy who was, what was his name? Whitfield, anyway, he was an Anglican, he was a member of the Church of England.
Whitfield, yeah.
Yeah, right, so that was Whitfield. So he was a member of the Church of England. And then you have the Presbyterians, of course the Methodists. You know, John Wesley was a born-again Christian, he was an evangelical. But
he was an Anglican priest.
But on the other hand, he did appoint bishops. He was actually, his brother Samuel Wesley appointed bishops. John Wesley remained a member of the Church of England until his dying day. But he was definitely, and he got born, and that's when born-againism comes from, because there was this group of Central European Protestant Christians who called themselves Moravians. They came from Moravia, in what is now what was Czechoslovakia.
Jan Hus.
The Hussites. And John Wesley went to a meeting of the Moravians, and there was this outpouring of emotion. And that became part of John Wesley's view, that this was the born-again experience. Like in the third chapter,
kind of ecstasy.
In the third chapter of John, where Jesus says to Nicodemus, "You must be born again." Right. So, so this is the origin of evangelical Christianity: is John Wesley attending a Moravian sect meeting. Before that, you don't have in Protestant Christianity this insistence on being born again. That didn't exist. I mean, you can fit what happened into that.
In the
Luther didn't go around preaching. You have to have this emotional experience on a particular date, and then you're born again. And if you don't have that, you're not a true Christian. But that's what became the evangelical thing. It came from Methodism. But Methodism evolved because they had paid ministers who went to seminaries and learned Greek, and then they realized it wasn't all so simple. And so then Methodism other sects came along. And then so eventually Baptism came along. Now none of these other groups were Baptists. But by the time of the 20th century, all evangelical Christians pretty much were Baptists. In other words, you are baptized by total immersion. And both the both the Plymouth Brethren and this FIEC church, they had a baptistry underneath the floor. They could open it up and it was fill it up with water, and there'd be people would be baptized. They'd be dunked completely in water as adults, and that was, and of course baptismo in Greek means immersion. That's the origin of baptism. You're immersed in water, but the sprinkling was a kind of concession to practical convenience, right?
Baptismo sounds like a comic book superhero.
Yeah, right. Well, it was that kind of a superhero.
Well, also you have the what you bind and loose on earth will bind and loose in heaven.
Right,
so.
right. Yeah, there are New Testament verses which strongly suggest that you have to be baptized if you want to go to heaven. But generally, the interpretation has been that if you repent and turn to God and give your life to Jesus, and then you get killed 5 minutes later, you are going to go to heaven. That's the general view. And that even though you weren't baptized, and of course, Protestant churches do not have any notion of purgatory, which is inherent in Catholicism. In Catholicism, you could spend millions of years suffering torments to pay off for all your sins, right, before you go to heaven. But in Protestant Christianity, there's no purgatory. There's heaven or hell, right? So I forget how we got onto this now, but this is the story of my life until I left home at the age of 17 and I'd already become a journalist, working for this newspaper. Around this time, I was wrestling with how much of Christianity was true, and eventually I decided none of it was true. Right? And there wasn't even a historical individual called Jesus. I don't think there was. I think that was just a made-up story. But the thing is, other things were going on in my life at the time. And one of the things that was going on, which is interesting in view of Kornai, at the age of 17, I'd definitely become an atheist, and I was working as a journalist. But I was absolutely obsessed with classical music, in particular with Béla Bartók. Bartók Béla, because in Hungarian they give the surname before the Christian name. That was one of my main preoccupations was music. I mean, I was also interested in the Beatles at the same time, who were just becoming this was like the second or third year of Beatlemania. So I was interested in that, but I didn't regard it as seriously as I regarded classical music. Classical in a very broad sense, including modern music like Bartók.
So what was his name again? Bartók?
Bartók, B-A-R-T-O-K. Béla Bartók, you've heard of Bartók?
I probably did, but...
Yeah, you've heard of Bartók. Everybody's heard of Bartók, come on. But of course, what everybody's heard of is a very subjective thing. Recently, I mentioned to a group of 5 people, one of whom is in their 60s and the others are in their 30s, something about R. Crumb comics, and not one of them knew anything about who R. Crumb was or what comics he'd written. To me, this is astounding.
I know of it because I've seen the documentary.
Oh, okay.
But of course I wasn't alive in the 60s to
Right.
experience it.
If you were active and alive and alert in the 60s, you had to know about R. Crumb, and you had to know about Mr. Natural, who was one of his main characters.
R. Crumb, I've never heard of him.
Robert Crumb.
Yeah, Robert Crumb.
Robert Crumb, no.
But he was always known as R. Crumb.
I only know of Robert Crumb, I think, from having known someone a number of years ago who, she's a millennial, and she was very into Robert Crumb.
Oh,
liked
really?
His art style, liked the subject matter.
Well, there's something addictive about R. Crumb. Yeah. But anyway, I just give that as an example. You can go around thinking everybody knows about this, and you suddenly find hardly anybody knows about it.
Yeah, that's definitely a, what was it, 60s?
Yeah, his heyday was like, he made like, what, art, album covers for Janis Joplin and the, right?
Yeah, but I mean...
And then he was like underground comic
His
artist.
main sort of contribution was stories told in comic frames, you know. He did do a thing, was it Felix the Cat or Fritz the Cat or whatever, but that wasn't as good as his thing about humans. But anyway, that's just an example. I thought everybody in the world knew about R. Crumb, and it turns out I'm one of the few who does.
Yeah, he was the creator of Fritz the Cat.
Fritz the Cat, yeah. But that's not a big. That's not.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen. I know the documentary.
You know, Mr. Natural was his character, a guy with a long beard. But,
yes, that's when I think of Crumb. I think of the character with the long beard. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's just an example of how. So I used to think all kinds of people knew all kinds of things, and then gradually, as I got older, I realised most people are totally ignorant of these things.
Speaking of the Darby dispensationalist stuff, there is a pastor that I happened to discover as a result of a super chat thrown into a live stream that I watch every day, or that I listen to every day. And this guy's name is Joel Webben, and the YouTube channel used to be called Right Response Ministries, and now it's called NXR Studios.
Yeah, I'm completely aware. I saw this debate recently.
Yeah, the one about interracial stuff.
Oh yeah. He lost that debate hard.
I mean, I don't see it that way, but you know, that's fine. Anyway,
I was going to say I didn't finish off what I said.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
About the Billy Graham Crusades.
Well,
and of course, in Britain there were various imitation Billy Grahams. There was a guy called Eric Hutchings who did Billy Graham type things. But anyway, Billy Graham did come to England, and he was treated as a big celebrity, and he was interviewed on TV and all that kind of thing. But as an example of what evangelical Christianity was typically like in this period, some of the people in this church suddenly become aware of this very uncomfortable fact. Billy Graham's wife, Ruth Graham, wore makeup.
She wore makeup.
Uh-oh, well, I guess your dad was scandalized.
So
right? This
was like, they were used to thinking that anybody who wore makeup was a spawn of the devil or whatever. In evangelical churches, I'll just tell you this, people give testimonies. People stand up at a meeting and they say, this is what God has done, and they give an account of their life and what when Jesus came into their life, how it changed them, right? And they would always say things like, I used to go to dances and I used to go to the cinema. And the implication was they never went anymore to dances or to the cinema. And they might say, I used to wear makeup if they were women. People were not yet advanced enough to have transsexual notions of such things. But anyway, so in that way, if you're a member of one of these churches, you picked up things that you would not be told directly by the preacher. You must not go to dances and you must not go to the cinema. They wouldn't do that. But you'd pick it up from people's testimonies, because they'd all say, I used to smoke cigarettes, I used to drink alcohol, I used to go dancing, I used to go to the cinema, and of course I don't do any of that anymore because God has changed my life. And so you picked up the notion that you must not do any of those things. But even though nobody was telling you from the pulpit, actually, they wouldn't call it a pulpit even. But I mean, nobody would preach to you directly in a sermon, you must not do any of these things. You'd pick up the fact that you must not do any of these things because from people's testimonies. Because it was just an obvious sign. How else would you behave after you had Jesus in your life? You would not want to go dancing or go to the cinema. Why would you want to? Because so many glorious things were happening in your life because of Jesus in your heart. how could you conceivably have the slightest interest in going dancing or going to the cinema or wearing makeup or smoking cigarettes?
I know Jesus is real because of the euphoria I feel when I enter a cinema.
That would be a very unusual position at that time. Yeah, so it was a bit of a crisis for some evangelicals that were had to face the fact that Billy Graham's wife wore makeup.
I mean,
now, of course, evangelical Christianity has evolved. Now you can see it's a
women can preach.
Well,
not in most churches, no.
yeah.
What are you trying? A lot of the big Trump-supported evangelical people are women pastors.
No, not a lot. No, it's rare. It's rare. I mean, generally speaking, Paul says very clearly that women should not be allowed to speak in church.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop any of Trump's female spiritual advisors from talking in church. That doesn't stop from people. Did women speak in your dad's evangelical?
No, they would never have women preaching a sermon.
Preaching a sermon is one thing, but they still speak in church, talk about how bad wearing makeup was.
They give a testimony.
Okay, that's still talking. That still violates Paul's directives.
No, the testimony.
No, it is not.
Testimony is different from taking a position of authority and preaching.
Right, that's the point. Yes,
that's different. Those two.
Yeah,
things
women are supposed to be submissive.
Okay, they're supposed to be submissive. That's why Paul directs letters to females, and that's why you have.
A man is writing to females, telling them what's up. That's yes. Paul is a man.
Who is Paul writing Romans to?
The Romans, the church.
Other than the Romans, but he specifically at the end addresses to a female.
Oh yeah, right. Well, that's okay. You can write. You're allowed to write to females. You're allowed.
The New Testament shows that there is a greater participation of females than currently exist in the church.
Well, the participation can take different forms.
The church has always been male-led. Always has.
Yeah.
Which church are you talking about?
Any evangelical church.
Oh, evangelical church. Okay. That's not the sum of Christianity.
I should say this: that outside the English-speaking world, for instance, in the German-speaking world, evangelical means something completely different. Well, not completely different. See, evangelical simply means of the gospel, which evangelion means good news in Greek, which is gospel is good news in Anglo-Saxon. So evangelical just means of the gospel. In fact, most descriptions of Christian denominations are things which all Christians claim. Catholic, which means universal. Evangelical, which means of the gospel. Orthodox, which means sticking to the true doctrine. Most of those things all Christian denominations claim for themselves.
A lot of modern Protestants use lowercase o Orthodox to sneak in their Protestant bullshit.
Well, they regard as Orthodox what is in
Orthodox Christianity means
you find
Christ alone, within faith alone.
You find right, but that comes from Luther. But it's upheld.
But that's how some Protestants call Orthodox nowadays.
Right. But that is a doctrine of Protestantism. Sola Scriptura, only the Bible. Whereas the Catholic Church holds that the Catholic Church has traditions which are just as good as what's in the Bible, or can even override it. So that's a difference between Catholic and Protestant.
Protestants don't have that whole Peter giving
right.
I can't think of what's his name, Billy Graham. Billy Graham doesn't have the keys to the kingdom, but I think
Well, but the thing is, what happens is, Peter in the story says that Jesus is, I forget exactly the words, but
right.
But then Jesus says, you are Simon and shall be called Peter, which is actually if we imagine this really happened, it would be Kepas in Aramaic, but it's in Greek, so it's Petros, which means a rock or a stone, right? And then he says, and on this rock I will found my church. And what we were told was that the rock was Peter's confession that Jesus was Lord. That's what we were told. And it didn't mean that Peter was going to be founder of the church.
Yeah, that's what of course you guys were told. That's why you have that's why Protestantism has 10,000 schisms, or
well, that's it. Because Protestantism has no recognized central authority, and in that sense, it's very much like Sunni Islam. There is no central authority. So if you wanted to set up a mosque that had some slight difference from all the other mosques, no one would stop you. And it's the same with Protestantism. If you set up a new sect that has some slight difference from all the other sects, no one's going to stop you.
Actually, they'll only not stop you if it's permitted.
Well,
so
yeah,
you have German princes who did allow Protestantism.
Well, but that's a different thing. No, there were certain parts of Northern Europe, but Scandinavia and Northern Germany, where the Lutheran Church for a long time became the established church.
Yes, Church of Sweden is Lutheran.
But there were other places like Holland, the Netherlands, where there were many different Protestant churches, including Calvinists. And Calvin was against that kind of established church thing. And
sure he was. Wink.
Well, he did exercise a lot of authority in Geneva because he became the ruler, effectively, of Geneva. But,
yeah, wink.
And he had, what's his name, executed.
Servetus.
Servetus, yeah. Because Servetus didn't believe that Jesus was the only begotten Son of God.
Kill him.
Well, it was worse than that, because Servetus wrote to Calvin, and Calvin wrote back and said, yeah, come to Geneva, we tolerate everybody here. And so he came, and then they decided to have him executed, and Calvin acted appropriately, and so he was executed. And then, of course, I'm guessing, a lot of Catholics throughout Europe thought, well, there's something serious about these Protestants. They did have that heretic executed, whereas our Roman people never got round to it.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
But I read the King James version of the Bible. That's the version that I read.
Yeah,
that's what the version that the Church of England said you can only read.
That's what we
for a long period of time.
I think
the authorized version.
I think that was a challenge for many evangelical Christians what to do, but eventually I think they mostly accepted the new translations, which were more accurate to the Greek in certain respects. So I think that's there are still evangelical sects which say that the King James version is the only correct version, but that's a very difficult argument.
Or that the King James is the real actual translation.
There was a committee of people appointed by James and then in 1611 they produced this translation, and since then a lot of earlier manuscripts of some of the Greek books of the New Testament have been found, and we have much more accurate treatment of some details. So it's very difficult to say that. You have to say, you more or less, if you're going to take that position, you have to say that the translators who were appointed by the king to do that translation were themselves divinely inspired. And that's a difficult argument to make.
There was a lot of controversy with that, because I know like in the late 19th century you had the revised version that came out in the 1880s, mm-hmm. like with Fenton, John Anthony Hort, and Westcott. They were prime movers of that, and they were, I believe, with the Church of England.
Yeah.
I think they came out with this the revised version. It came out in the 1880s. Then in 1901 they had the ASV, I think the American Standard Version, which was an Americanized version with that. but there's been like a lot of controversy over the texts that were used. Because some like these texts that the revised version, they came from Egypt. Sometimes they're known as the Alexandrian text.
Right.
But King James version comes from what Syria.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There were two main corpuses of the Alexandrian, and I forget what the other one was called. But yeah, they both existed and were made use of by. I mean, you know, for many centuries, the Latin Vulgate was the church, the Catholic Church's authorized version of the Bible, and of course they didn't encourage its spread among ordinary people. Apart from anything else, ordinary people couldn't read. So, but
let alone they couldn't read let alone Latin or whatever the hell.
Right, but I mean, if for most Europeans prior to the 15th century, if you to learn to read at all and to learn to read Latin were both out of the question, you know. But then, of course, you had the invention of printing, and that's what popularized universal literacy, and lots of people started reading. And what did they want to read? Well, they wanted to read the Bible. So you got these, you got Luther's translation of the Bible, and you also got other kinds of
Douay Rheims.
That was the Catholic
that's
version.
the Catholic version.
That's the Catholic version. The exiles in France were translating because it was I think it was concurrent with the King James, but the King James, because it was authorized, this version was unauthorized.
Douay Rheims.
Douay Rheims was because Catholicism was practically outlawed in England post, you know, Reformation.
You know, in this will give you a picture of.
That's why I'm in the United States.
This will give you a picture of what it was like. In the book of Revelation, there are these people who are fornicating with the scarlet woman, the whore of Babylon. And I forget whether it's God or some spirit is saying, come out of her. Stop fornicating with the whore of Babylon. And the guy who was the preacher in this evangelical church said, I'm often asked whether Catholics can possibly be Christians. And here we have the answer. Yes, they can be, and God is telling them to come out and stop fornicating with the whore of Babylon. So there can be Christians who are members of the Catholic Church, but they must come out. They must obey God and leave the Catholic Church. Stop fornicating with the whore of Babylon. That was a sermon that we heard. And that set my mind to rest.
Have you ever seen? I'm sure you've seen Game of Thrones, right? No.
I've seen bits of it. Yeah.
There's a red woman, and I'm wondering if that's supposed to be some reference to the whore of Babylon. She's like a priest who, you know, worships the Lord of Light, and you know she can manipulate fire and do blood magic and stuff. So I don't know.
I'm very, you know, as a somebody who is learning more about my Scotch-Irish and English heritage, and Catholic recusant heritage. I am, for whatever, I have no reason to feel sympathy to St. Thomas More or to Becker or to any of these other people, but because I've learned about my hair, now I do, for whatever reason. I like, you know, oh, I gotta side with Thomas More now for whatever fucking. When Irish people talk about being proud of being Irish, and when Italian people talk about being proud of being Italian, I now know what it feels like to be proud of being English.
All right. Good job.
But I have to do. Am I St. Thomas More, or am I, you know, King Henry VIII. Like, that's the divide. Or, you know, like, because the seat of Canterbury goes back to Rome, but, you know, Anselm and all these others on that, but Catholic, you know, perhaps the Swiss Guard can come into Canterbury and reclaim what is rightfully theirs.
Well, but you see,
and I'm joking, by the way.
The Catholic Church.
Don't believe
the Catholic Church takes a particular view. It might surprise you to know that in the Catholic Church there are married priests.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's like if a priest from another denomination
not
is
any
married.
other denomination.
It's
the laying on of hands, the apostolic succession. Jesus laid on his hands on Peter. I don't know what you're thinking. Cut that out.
No.
And so Peter then laid on his hands on other apostles, and that went on, unbroken. What are they going to do with women priests now in the Church of England? I don't know.
It goes unbroken until St. Thomas More and
but they're still regarded by the Catholic Church as a succession of laying on of hands, and they can become priests even though they might have married when they were in the Episcopalian or Anglican Church, and they're accepted, and they become married priests because
the Catholic Church is dwindling.
The Catholic
they can take
Church,
anything.
No, I mean this is a serious point. The Catholic Church does not claim that Jesus or Peter instituted the rule of celibacy. They accept that this was a later church teaching, which you're bound to accept because the church has teaching authority, which goes beyond what's in the scriptures. But it's not something inherent in the Christian faith, right? And so if the Church of Rome could, without contradiction, abolish the celibacy rule, because it's not fundamental. It's a decision they have made, and it's part of their teaching authority. They could revise it
To the extent that the Catholic hierarchy has been infiltrated by the Lavender Mafia, as I've heard it called.
It's not they've been infiltrated. It's just that's just who they are. That's what that type of those type the Lavender Mafia did not infiltrate anything. That's just the type of people that type of calling attracts.
And your basis for that is?
Personal experience.
Okay. All right. Well.
And I mean, how many like, you know, scandalous sort of like macho Protestant evangelicals have had like homosexual scandals. A few of them, I guess. Doesn't prove that all of them have, but I mean,
anyway, what I'm saying
if you're gonna like want to live with a community of people who are the same gender as you,
Military.
I mean, I think there's like a there's a thing to that.
Okay. So the thing I was going to say is, one way to whatever extent that is an issue, it might be that one way to counteract that is to, reverse that teaching and allow for married priests.
Oh, they could do that. Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing in the basic Catholic doctrine that prevents them doing that, because they accept that there have been periods in church history where priests have been married.
Yeah. No conspiracies ever happen. No conspiracies ever happen. It's all just happenstance.
So you have evidence of a conspiracy?
I think some stuff has been written on it. I'd have to look it up, but
I think
they might
the
lay out
most
the
rational explanation is no. There's something about being a Christian evangelical, even in the lowercase e, that just attracts a certain type of person that might be homosexual.
Hey, maybe. I don't know. I'm not firmly committed to one view or the other, but whatever. One of the things I was going to say is this pastor Joel Webbin, who I'm sure you very much don't like, he co-wrote a book, I forget who the other guy is, called Hyphenated Heresy, and I think this talks very explicitly about this, dispensationalism stuff. And
the hyphenation being Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian, right. Judeo-Christian, hyphenated heresy. The whole Judeo-Christian thing, according to, and that's, he's not the first guy I've encountered that has,
Does St. Peter's,
that has talked smacked about it. Vox Day has talked about it, other people in the dissident right sphere have talked about it, so there's this book, the Hyphenated Heresy, that goes through this dispensationalist stuff and, dismantles it, supposedly. I haven't read it, I don't know, but I've listened to a few podcasts where the stuff is discussed, and it's, fairly compelling,
Right, so you're linking the dispensationalism with...
But this dude is a Christian nationalist who would probably prefer Catholics to not express themselves, right?
I mean, before the 19th century, I don't think Christians of any kind...
I'm talking about the Christian nationalists in 2026.
Catholic or Protestant would have accepted the notion of Judeo-Christian.
Well, there's popes,
basically I think it's a post-Second World War thing. It's a post-Holocaust thing.
We are spiritual Semites. I think that was Paul. I think that was.
I think that's a misunderstanding, because I think the New Testament is profoundly Greek. And
Spiritual Semites by Pope Pius XI,
not really
1938.
Yeah, I know he said that, but I think that's a part of this post-Holocaust sympathy,
But that's 1938 is prior to.
Right, okay, yeah, well, that's a way of saying we don't completely approve of the Nazis. But I mean, I think that's a new thing.
So this Christian nationalist stuff that you may prescribe to, do you really think that's Jesus is cool with that sort of stuff?
I haven't looked too much into it, so I don't know.
You're Catholic, right?
Yeah.
So when the Pope says this week that we have to, condemn anti-Semitism, does that mean that the Pope should? I mean, I certainly think that Cardinal Supich should deny the sacraments to Nick Fuentes. And I think that'd be totally in line with Catholic teaching and Catholic practice.
That's not clear. I mean, the Pope can express an opinion about something. It doesn't.
Well, that's why I said this. I said the Cardinal.
It doesn't. Or a Cardinal can express an opinion.
The Cardinal can certainly be like, "Hey, you buddy, you can't partake anymore."
Well,
they don't do that often.
But I think it's pretty warranted in this case.
What is your top reason? Okay, you sucked me in. What is the top reason why you think it would be warranted? Just one.
Because he goes against teaching of the church.
What's your top example of going against the teaching of the church?
Bigotry.
Is there something in the New Testament or the Catholic doctrine that says we're against bigotry?
I would certainly, well,
I don't think so.
I think you can deduce love your neighbor in certain ways, but you can even have, even if you're gonna accept, as Vic is a Catholic person, submits to the bishops, if the Pope says that anti-Semitism is bad, wouldn't, as a Catholic, you have to...
No, you don't have to agree with popes. I mean, there's an infallibility doctrine, but it only applies to ex cathedra statements.
Sure, but okay, even whatever. But like, certainly, like, don't be bigoted against Jews is certainly in line with like Christianity, right?
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think you're allowed to be bigoted against Jews or anybody
Okay,
else.
why do you think that?
Because I've read quite a bit about the history of the Catholic Church, and they were often...
Okay, I'm talking, where in the
bigoted
scriptures,
against
where in
Jews.
church teaching...
Hold on, let him finish a sentence, bro. You're interrupting a lot.
No.
So, say that again?
I think in the history of the Catholic Church, they've often been bigoted against Jews. And also, there is the question of what counts as a Jew. And does that mean people who follow the Jewish religion, or does it mean, you know, Jewish has this two meanings, a people or a religion. Usually, when we talk about anti-Semitism, we're talking about people who are against Jews for reasons other than their religion. You know?
No, I don't know. I think that, like, if you're going to say, if this person that these Christian nationalists that Vic is appealing to certainly aren't going to be very tolerant of Jewish people in their midst. And I would certainly think that that would be certainly anti-Christian.
What does tolerance mean? Why do you have to be tolerant? Why can't you just choose to be with people you choose to be with? When did I
say you should be against tolerance, or when did Jesus say you should be not against tolerance?
But the Catholic Church has often persecuted Jews ferociously.
Sure, I'm not going to deny that, but that's not what they teach now. And if we're talking, Vic's a Catholic, so Catholic, so he believes in the keys of the heaven, right?
You're saying that what they teach now is though.
But it does matter, because if the Pope has the keys to the heaven, what the Pope preaches now certainly. Oh, so the Catholic Church was anti-Semitic in the past, therefore it should be anti-Semitic in the future?
I think that...
I don't think Jesus would be about that. I don't think...
Yeah,
even Paul would be about that.
You are claiming the role of a Catholic theologian.
Me?
Yeah, you. This is what you're doing. You're saying, I'm a Catholic theologian. I'm telling you what...
I actually never said I'm a Catholic
telling you
theologian.
what Jesus thought. No, you can't do that. There's a whole history of the Catholic Church.
I mean, I was told I was an Vincentian, so maybe I am a theologian.
Now, I mean, the thing is this. After they expelled the Jews from Spain, Spain had been a Muslim country, and therefore a country that tolerated Jews and Christians. After the Catholics took over, they no longer tolerated Jews or Christians. There were a lot of Jews in Spain, and they were all told that they had a choice. They would be killed or they could leave Spain. And a lot of them were killed, a lot of them left Spain.
What percentage of the population think we're pro killing Jews?
I don't know if they did a public opinion poll. The point
but
is,
if it was a majority of them, then I guess it was consensual.
The point is, this was the Catholic, what the Catholic Church did.
Dave Smith.
Right now, once they got all the Jews out of Spain, they then started pursuing the Jews who converted to Catholicism on the grounds that they were secret Judaizers. They were not sincere about their conversion, even though they had converted on pain of death, which probably increases the probability they weren't sincere. But the point is, the Catholic Church in Spain took this line that there are all these people pretending to be Catholics who are secretly Jews, and they've got to be found, and where we find them, we execute them. And they did execute a lot of them. So, you know, this is Catholicism. It has a history of, persecuting Muslims and Jews and Christian and non-Catholic Christians on a vast scale. And, you know, on a vast scale. You know, in European history, the Catholic Church has slaughtered many, many thousands of pagans, Jews, Christians of non-Catholic denominations, in other words, heretics, and also people who had the outward observances of Catholics, but who it was determined, after a hearing, an investigation, it was usually involving torture of the person to get their true beliefs, that they were really secretly Jews. This is the history of Christianity in Europe is the history of extermination of people who disagreed. It's a vast history. It's huge. It's consistent over a very long period. And
so therefore, if Christian nationalists in America want to persecute Jews, it's okay to do so because of the Christian.
You're trying to argue as a would-be Catholic theologian. Look at it objectively. The point.
I mean, I can't really look at anything objectively if I'm like arguing theology.
Why not?
Because theology is just like you're recalling
I would
scriptures.
look at it objectively and say that I would want to have a very serious argument to make me think that there's anything inherent in Christianity or Catholicism that is tolerant, when their whole history is 99% intolerance, and they wouldn't be where they are in the world except because of their program of extermination. That's Catholicism. That's Christianity. That's the main sect of Christianity that took over, and they, you know, I mean, when the Crusaders got to the Holy Land, what did they do? They slaughtered Muslims, Jews, and Christians, because all the Christians they found were in schism. They were Eastern Orthodox, and therefore they should be slaughtered. That's what the Crusades were. They were wars of slaughter. Muslims never held that. Muslims always held that Christians and Jews should be tolerated and left alone, and not forced to convert. That was always the Muslim view, that they were people of the book, and people of the book meant that they should not be harmed in any way. The Christian view was the opposite. Slaughter everybody who doesn't agree with the one true church. That was the Christian view for many centuries.
Well, the libertarian view is that we need a welfare state because they all were like, Hayek said so. Does that mean that
the
libertarians supporting a welfare state is...
are against a welfare state.
I'm sorry?
Libertarians, by definition, are against a welfare state.
Says who?
This is common to all libertarians.
Libertarian's a made-up word. It can mean whatever you want it to mean.
Okay, so you can call a dog a rhinoceros if you want to. You know.
I don't get what the point of this, like... This is something... Who talks about this? This is almost like when... there's this one debater on YouTube who he talks about... Or no, there's this... it's Dave Green. He's the distributist, and he has a Substack, and it's very meaty, substantive stuff. He does a podcast or a stream every 2 weeks, and one of the things he talks about when you talk about debating somebody on the left, especially if you're talking about, you know, like the streamer types like Destiny or Vouch, or it's all a frame game, and it's all pretending not to know things so that you can't actually advance the discussion. Mm-hmm. And it seems like that's what's happening here. Like, well, libertarianism can mean anything. It's like, what's the point? Like,
dude, you really think that
like
you heard me tonight, and then my sort of like facetious fucking remarks on my way out the door is what I really believe?
I've heard any number of things that you actually believe that makes me question what is, you know, like tongue-in-cheek and what is real, and, you know, like, I don't know, man, like, it's hard to tell when the snark is laid on so thick all the time. Like, I'm just, you can do what you want, I mean, you know, it's up to you. But, you know, at the end of the day...
Does libertarian fidelity matter to you?
What does that mean?
I've never heard of that concept before. Libertarian fidelity? What does that mean?
Take a guess. I mean, you guys are smart people. Or fidelity to libertarian principles?
Well, I think there is such a thing as libertarianism, but maybe there's some flexibility on how it's defined. But it can't... Libertarianism cannot be whatever somebody wants it to be, just... random off the top of their head.
So is Hayek a libertarian?
No, obviously not.
How is he not a libertarian?
Well, in the first place, he always said he wasn't.
Just because he is... I'm not a libertarian. I would probably call myself I would probably classify myself as a classical liberal before libertarian. However, I've spent a good chunk of my life
look,
working for the Libertarian Party and advocating for what in the colloquial sense might be libertarianism. Is that not the same thing?
Prior to the 1960s, in the 1960s, there suddenly have a lot of people in the United States calling themselves libertarians, and there was a very clear definition of what it meant. But prior to that, libertarian usually meant a non-statist socialist, like a anarcho-syndicalist. That would be the norm.
Benjamin Tucker.
No, he wasn't a socialist. He wasn't an anarcho-syndicalist.
He called himself a socialist.
Oh, really? But
he
believed in private property,
yeah, but he did call himself a socialist. And when you have people in 2025 who hear the phrase libertarian socialist and be like, oh, a contradiction in terms, you can at least, you could point to Benjamin Tucker, who called himself an anarchist and a socialist at the same time.
Well, I don't know why he called himself a socialist, but I do know.
Well, Bastiat said that even anarchism is a form of socialism. So this is not just something that just like popped out of the air. I mean, when you had Bastiat doing his debate with Proudhon, I mean, these are things they were debating.
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what Bastiat thought about this terminology.
Oh, yeah, Bastiat thought anarchism was... He was not an anarchist. He thought anarchism was a form of socialism.
Well, okay. My point was...
Benjamin Tucker.
My point was that before the 1960s, the word libertarian, to denote a political ideology, mostly meant something like an anarcho-syndicalist or an anarcho-communist, someone like Kropotkin, that kind of person, who was definitely anti-capitalist and pro-socialist, but didn't believe in what was called state socialism, didn't believe in a powerful state.
But okay, if somebody who believes in a socialism but not a powerful state, can they really be a socialist?
Oh yeah. I mean, you might argue that their view wouldn't work out in practice and they would have to sacrifice one or the other, which is what I would argue. But yeah, there were lots of people in the 19th century and into the early 20th century who were genuinely, I mean, Emma Goldman, people like this, genuinely opposed to capitalism. They didn't want private property. They didn't want money making to go on. But they were libertarian, they were called libertarians, and that was partly because they were against state control.
And Rothbard does kind of gloat about redefining the word in the mid-50s or so.
Right, it did. I mean, it did take on a new meaning in the 1960s, and maybe it took it on in the 1950s. I don't know that for certain. But I mean, the libertarianism became a movement in the United States in the 1960s. Lots of people were talking about it, and some leftists were saying, "Oh, this is a misuse of the term libertarianism because libertarianism has always been of the left, and this is a right-wing thing." And of course they were right, but you can't copyright these kinds of names. And libertarian has a sort of primary meaning in English, meaning in favor of freedom, right? However you interpret that. So it was difficult. And also, the free market people in the United States in the 1960s could hardly call themselves liberals, because the idea that liberal was a kind of soft form of socialism was very well established in the language at that time. So they were more or less forced to call themselves libertarians, or come up with some new term, which they didn't. I suppose voluntarist or something like that would count as a new term. But
so he says, Eric said that I was a alpha male. He's the first that ever has described me as such. I would never describe myself as being one. If I say I'm not, but he says I am I an alpha male?
I mean, is there some objective criterion for describing someone as an alpha male?
I think there is.
I mean, I would say someone who gets more women than anybody else. That would be my immediate reaction.
I think a male, right? He's a male, right?
I
can
possibly.
He looks like a male. We could ask him to strip off and submit to an examination.
Let's say before
you can do that after I leave, man.
No, I wouldn't do it.
I can clearly say.
Leave.
I can clearly say it's not beta male. So what's left? I guess it's alpha male. I don't know. Is there
if I have a couple, I mean, I never call myself a feminist.
He's not
But if I have other people in my life calling me a feminist, am I a feminist?
It depends on what the objective definition is and how much lined up to it you are. You know, but like, this is one of the, like, in the pickup artist stuff, there was basically a dichotomy, to oversimplify. There was basically a dichotomy. You were either alpha or you were beta. Okay. The alpha was, you know, whatever you traditionally think of as an alpha. You know, they're, you know, assertive, status driven, and, you know, competitive and masculine, and they are more successful with women. And the betas are kind of the opposite. So it was like, you know, if you were called a beta in that sense, that was an insult. You know, you were weak, maybe you had low T, you weren't successful with women, you weren't assertive and dominant, and you didn't have much status, that kind of thing.
I think it's an attitude. To me, beta is if you're a people pleaser, if you care about what people think and try to please them, you're beta.
Sure.
I don't think you're like that. You're not.
Sure.
You're not at all.
Attitude.
I don't think I'm like that
Attitude.
Either,
yeah.
I don't think I would define that.
Beta doesn't have to be. Alpha doesn't have to be high status, ambitious, or macho, or successful.
No, I'm giving you a cluster of indicators. You know, like, you might be able to have one or two that are not there, but you're probably still an alpha. And similar to beta, you might have one or two that are not there, but like, the more of them you have, the more, you know, the more confidence you can have in, like, oh, that person is a beta, or that person is an alpha.
Yes, true.
But like, this is where Vox Day's sociosexual hierarchy comes into play. Is, you know, he comes along and he says, yeah, alpha and beta to a certain extent, there's something to that, but there are other categories that need to be delineated, because it isn't just alpha and beta, like there's only two.
Yeah, I know, roughly.
Right.
Is Fox Day's his categorization has got to be as arbitrary as any other form of categorization, I'm sure.
No, it very much is not arbitrary. Like, this is actually something that came up in the email discussion group at some point, where the whole point is he noticed things in the world and he put a label on it. So you can argue that the label was arbitrary. You can say, oh, instead of delta, he could have used the word kafarble. Like, yes, by definition, words are arbitrary in that sense, but what they denote isn't. Like, a flower by any other name, and so on and so forth. You can call it whatever you want, but it is a flower. The whole ranking thing is not arbitrary. It's, here's a cluster of behaviors, I'm going to slap a label on it. Here's a different cluster of behaviors, I'm going to slap a different label on it.
him.
Correct.
Fox Day.
Correct.
So you arbitrarily...
The way Aristotle categorized a whole bunch of different things, that doesn't make it illegitimate just because it was one dude.
I never said it was illegitimate, I just said it was arbitrary.
Arbitrary implies illegitimate, but like it's not arbitrary. It just isn't. It's
so
pointing to
let's
things in
say
the world.
let's say this guy named Friedrich Hayek says I believe in X and I believe in Y and I believe in Z, and me and Adam and Gabe and Karina say, oh, that guy's a libertarian. Is he a libertarian?
If there is an already established definition of what libertarianism is, it's not a consensus that says, yes, that person is a libertarian. It's the consensus might be an indicator, but you would have to look objectively and say, hey, here's the definition, here's the positions of what Hayek said. Oh, look, he lines up on these things, but there's these critical things that make him not a libertarian, for example. And in fact, that's kind of what David was talking about. Like, he's not a libertarian, and even he said he's not a libertarian, but that's just an example, right? But if we didn't have a pre-existing definition of libertarianism, let's say it's an alternate universe, and here's this guy Hayek, and he's saying, you know, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, whatever the list is of things he said, and we're just going to put that as a cluster and slap a label on it, you can do that. That's fine. And then, subsequent to that, you might have, you know, subsequent person, theorist A, and theorist B, and theorist C, who comes after Hayek. And they have this list, and this list matches up perfectly with what Hayek said. Then yes, that's, person A is a Hayekian, because we already have an established definition of what a Hayekian is. Person B comes along and, you know, they have like 90% of it, but maybe the 10% that's missing is like absolutely necessary, but not sufficient for Hayekianism. And so person B is not a Hayekian based on what we've already established. Like, this is kind of like, you know what I mean? So if you're trying to draw some kind of thing about like the sociosexual hierarchy and the ranks, you can. I
was actually making a point about definitions and what like that they're kind of just like what people colloquially apply them to. That's really the point.
To a certain extent.
Like David says, a Christian is to be somebody who persecutes Jews. Okay, he might have an argument for it. He gave a very persuasive one earlier.
That's not precisely what he said.
No, I didn't say that at all.
Yeah, that might be what they did, but that's not a defining trait, right? In fact, you could probably go to Christian doctrine and say, you know, the persecution of groups for mere membership in those groups or whatever is sinful and bad and wrong against Christianity.
There are people who held that, yeah.
Right. So,
and,
like,
you know.
But as far as, like, you know, it's at a certain sense, language is a collective human endeavor. So, to an extent
Comrade.
Right. So, to an extent, not collectivist, collective.
Still comrade, collect.
But wait, let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. It's unavoidable that language is a collective human endeavor.
And therefore,
necessarily, what that means is, to a certain extent, people decide what something means, because that's what language is. It's a collective human endeavor. Deciding what something means is part of language. Therefore, deciding what something means is also a collective human endeavor. So, in a very, like, the broadest possible sense of what language is, yes, you're right. But not at the micro level where, like, there's within a certain time frame of, you know, even if it's a few decades, where we have a pretty set within this time scale, a pretty set definition of something, and then somebody comes along and says, I have a totally different definition. That's the definition now. Like, not really. That's not how that works.
Well, I mean, people do that all the time, and that's what a lot of philosophizing is. Rand does it. Hoppe does it. So redefinition of words and then trying to, get people to go along with that is certainly a thing that happens, for sure.
Perhaps, but like, again, if there is an established set thing, like maybe somebody comes along and says, yeah, this established definition is insufficient because intuitively we know it should include these things that it doesn't include, so, let's, sort of like First Amendment jurisprudence where, like, they didn't know that there would be social media platforms, 250 years ago or whatever. They didn't know there'd be social media platforms, and they didn't know that there would be telecommunications and digital blah, blah, blah. Like, so, free speech wasn't, the printing press was the example, but not the defining example. Like, it was only printing presses, but, everything else can be abridged or whatever. Like, there's certain things where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe we can reassess like the relevance or the cogency of a definition as things happen, but like there's also the attempted redefinitions of things, and it's a very pernicious process because people have an ideological agenda to undermine the original meaning of something. Like, so for example, the word
Ayn Rand with altruism.
Maybe. So for example, like the word regulate, right? The word regulate means well run. Right, to make something regular, right? So when we
very prepared.
So when you talk about like, oh, the federal government can regulate interstate commerce, it's not like, oh, we can just make a bunch of laws to make things complicated, right? That's not regulation. Regulation is like, okay, the state of Illinois can't have a separate standard for how much fluid goes into a gallon compared to, say, the state of Idaho, compared to, say, the state of Texas. It all has to be the same size gallon. That's a form of regulation, to make regular, to streamline, for example, right? But the pernicious redefinition of regulation as just another word for lawmaking in order to retroactively say, oh, look, the Founding Fathers were totally in favor of, like, passing all these laws and regulations to make things super complicated. Like, no, that's not what they meant. Like, there's all kinds of pernicious redefinings of words in order to achieve an ideological outcome. So, my default is skepticism for redefining stuff, because at least 6 times out of 10, probably 8 times out of 10, somebody is doing something, some kind of trickery, and I'm not having it. You know what I mean? And the ones who are very adept at doing this are like, the left-wing postmodernists, where, words don't mean anything. Words can mean whatever we want, and that kind of thing. So, I don't know. Just a little bit of
the evolution of meanings of words happen all the time. That's more true. Frequently than the wholesale redefinition like Ayn Rand did. Those, for me, is just once in a while. We have to have sense of proportionality, because in human endeavor, the history, those things happen sporadically. For the majority of the time, we let words evolve, including the word regulate or regulation. I think it's evolved because things evolve. Things get more complicated after industrial revolution, all the stuff that society booms, and industry booms, and more complicated. So they regulate it so that it won't go out of hand. That's their pretext or their reasoning for more laws, more rules, but because we want to regulate the new situation.
If you guys want to regulate, I recommend Warren G versus Nate Dogg.
What's that? I'm not getting that reference.
It's a song called Regulate by Warren G and Nate Dogg. Later, guys. I'm leaving. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, David, for all your hospitality. Thanks for the good discussion.
Please get home safely.
I'm gonna slip and fall and die.
Don't.
But I
don't do
spent
that.
my last moments with you guys, so it makes
Right,
it
we have it on
Yeah,
record,
right.
so we can memorialize you
We'll
every year
treasure the memory.
with watching you on the tape.
So, I'm curious, unless anybody wants to, I'm curious to switch gears a little bit on foreign policy stuff and international
I was
stuff.
just going to say, I wonder for the next meeting whether we could do another one with Eduardo on Venezuela, or whether we should leave that off for a bit.
Like a follow-up? Yeah, that's a good
Things
point.
have happened, and we could ask him what's really happened.
Yeah, I gotta catch up on those. I've not read a single Venezuela email yet from the discussion.
I have Venezuela past Saturday. I sent you guys the tape, the recording, the link.
Yeah, I
In the
saw
discussion.
it.
Yeah,
I
we
didn't see the
just
whole
had
thing,
it.
but I'm going to.
Wait, you had one last Saturday?
Yeah, just past Saturday.
That's why I think maybe we should leave it a bit longer.
Okay, yeah.
So we have more update. Did you check your email? I sent you the proposal that I have for the next one.
What's that?
It's comparing the U.S. I sent it to you probably 3 days ago, or 2 days ago. Is for comparing the U.S. national security strategy with China's national security strategy. I find a lot of parallel, a lot of contrast, and something in between. Also, it's we have enough things happen, developments, to translate that into the real world stuff. So you translate from the
That sounds fascinating, actually.
release, they translate from the published strategy and into the real world stuff. And I find it very interesting. I almost made it a podcast because Hermione's dad went to emergency room. We didn't actually do it, but I had new ideas for that. So actually good that we didn't do it. I'm willing to present that to this group. Actually, if you look at the Venezuela tape that I did last Saturday, our format is not, we moved from the, I think you were there when I mentioned, from the lecture, then Q&A, we moved from that. We just from conversational from the beginning. Just like if you went to like certain seminars, those places, they rarely do lecture. They do conversational with a moderator, and then open to the conversation or Q&A or rebuttal with the audience. I move from that, but I'm open to whatever, like what Justin did, the more traditional lecture, and then open to Q&A. I'm open to anything.
I'll try to keep up with my emails better, and I think I might have bookmarked somewhere the meetup page for your geopolitical.
Yeah, just check it out. I mean, just
because I like coming to that on occasion, and there was something, without naming where exactly, there was something closer to my neck of the woods that I didn't see until after it had already happened, and I was like, oh damn it, I would have totally been there for that,
Yeah, that I didn't actively. I usually actively, pitch to you guys to the email chain with 70 people. I didn't do this because I remember we just did the same thing with the same guy.
Yeah.
December 15th or December 13th, right? I asked him immediately, say, I'm gonna book you. He said, okay. And then I find the time, it was January 24th. I was hoping we have a lot of developments so you don't have to totally repeat yourself. Lo and behold, we had a lot of developments, right?
Yeah.
So that was a good one.
I was thinking maybe we should hold off for a couple
yeah,
of months.
Give it 2 months. Yeah,
because so much is happening.
Yeah.
And it will is the US really going to attack Iran? It does look like it, but I hope they don't. But even though it would lead to the end of Israel.
So
do you think so?
I think so. I mean, unless the thing is, well, if you look at what do you call it, the 20-day war, that thing they had in June, it's clear that it was real defeat for the US and Israel, and they don't want to acknowledge it, and Trump wants to say that it was a great success, and all this, which is fine if that's what it takes to shut him up and keep him satisfied. Well, not shut him up, of course, but and now they've had time to build up a much bigger supply of missiles in Iran.
That would be fun.
So the only question is, does the West have some trick that we don't know about? You know, they very much operate on this idea that they have a trick. Like
pagers and cell phones.
Yeah, pagers and cell phones, that was one. But then this thing in Iran recently,
These
where
protests.
they got these CIA agents and Mossad agents to start attacking people, and then they said, "Oh, the government's cracking down on, you know, and therefore we were coming to the aid of the Iranian people." But the government sorted it out in a few days, and it was, you know, squelched quite quickly. So it didn't really work.
Right. As soon as I heard about that, I was like, "Oh, color revolution, color revolution."
Right. So I mean, but the West seems to work on having some trick, you know, up their sleeve that they can do, and usually it doesn't work.
Like they clicked on a YouTube video, this one weird trick to defeat Iran and you know, ensure Israeli hegemony.
Right.
You know, like all that clickbait titles. You know, the one weird thing.
But, I mean,
Number 7 will shock you.
It nearly always fails because it's the West and they keep failing. But they may have something. You know, you never quite know, because you know the thing is, if you look at history, a lot of big things that happen were unexpected. You know, like the Franco-Prussian War, people thought France would easily beat Prussia, and in fact, Prussia easily beat France, and as a result, you had the new German Reich, you know, under Bismarck, and Napoleon III lost power, and you had a new monarchy, and France lost Alsace and Lorraine. So it was a big defeat for France, and the end of the Second Empire, and that was unexpected, you know. I think the collapse of the French in 1940 was a bit unexpected as well. You know, that people thought the Maginot Line was impregnable, and so it's always possible that something will happen that's a big surprise. Maybe the West will come up with something, some trick that actually works. I mean, if I had to gamble, I would say they will fail. You know, if they attack Iran, I would say they'll be humiliated. And of course, Trump doesn't like to be humiliated. He hates it, actually. Most of us would think, "Oh, I was humiliated. Oh, that's a pretty bad thing." But Trump, he's prepared to destroy the world if he's humiliated, I'm guessing.
That's one of the things that you know, in the lead up to the 2024 election, you know, Nick, we'll call him Nick at the moment. Nick had been off the Trump train and said, like, you know, we're not going to get mass deportations because the midterms will come around, and it'll be too unpalatable to the public, and the midterms are coming. You know, we can't do this right now. We'll lose even more in the midterms. You know, and we're going to go to war in Iran. That was his other prediction. We're going to go to war in Iran, and then so, you know, June happens, or whenever it was when we did the bombing of the Fordo and one or two other ones. The nuclear sites or whatever, the nuclear bunkers, and you know, and I'm hearing, you know, and he had a stream just the other day about, in fact, I think it was last night's stream, talking about, you know, the situation, and you know that we're probably going to war in Iran, and you know, and there's even talk about, like, you know, American troops doing certain kinds of operations in Iran, and it's like, if he does this, man, like, then Nick will have been right. You know, if you're somebody who's more generally right-wing or more conservative or more whatever, freedom, Nick will probably have proven to be right, because he made a very interesting case that if Harris would have won, her political capital would have been so thin, and they would not have been able to do as much as what they'll almost certainly be able to do when they take power back after the midterms, and especially if they win the presidency in 2028.
Well, they won't get power if they win the midterms. It just means that Trump will be a lot weaker.
Okay, all right, fair, yes. Yes.
So I mean, so big, bold, and things that are unpopular with the left probably won't happen if And now it is conceivable that the Republicans won't make big losses in the midterms. I mean, there are several months to go, and some things might go right if the economy keeps on improving. If there's no recession, if they somehow avoid embarrassment in Iran, and the Venezuela I think is a plus for Trump in popular opinion, because so far they've done something decisive and unexpected without a big loss of American life. And
Nick is very pro what happened in Venezuela.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You know, so, I mean, another couple of things like Venezuela, and it could turn around for Trump, you know. I mean, all they've got to do is avoid losing a lot of seats, or some substantial number of seats. But I mean, if I had to bet now, I would say they are going to lose in the midterms. They, you know, the Democrats are going to get a lot more.
If you keep having people getting shot on the street by ICE, that wouldn't help.
Well, I don't think anybody's in danger if they're just walking along the street and not doing any mischief. I don't think they're in danger of being shot by.
Yeah, but
I wish they would call it nice. It would be so much nicer.
That is so perfect. I love that so much. I'd forgotten that you came up with that last year sometime.
That would
so great.
That would completely turn around the situation.
Like you have nice, and then like you have like a big logo patch of like a smiley face emoji on the arm or something like that. Like, oh man, that would be great.
I mean, the Trump administration needs to hire me, and I'll say, okay, I'll do whatever you want as long as you bomb Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. You know, that's you know, I was talking to a few people before we actually formally started the meeting, trying to get some insights on what other people were thinking about that ICE stuff, and it's like, I think one of the big issues is that a number of people have pointed out is most of the people who want to complain about the ICE tactics and we're doing it the wrong way. I mean, Nick has his own way of describing that. Yes, Trump is doing it the wrong way. He's like being all flashy and flamboyant with it, with a lot of heat. He doesn't use these terms, but it's a lot more heat than it is light. It's a lot more, bravado than actual substantive action. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true, and I think that is the wrong way to go about it. But that's different from, like, the tactics are too harsh or something like that. It's like most of the people who are complaining, about the tactics or whatever, these are people who don't even agree with the ICE mission at all anyway.
Right, exactly.
These are people who, if you could, they're trying to convince everybody, on the, tactics level of, oh, they're being too harsh, or, they're being like a Gestapo. They're trying to get their de facto nullification of immigration law through the back door of hamstringing ICE so that they can't do anything.
Yeah, no
because
doubt
what does enforcement look like if you want to deport people consistent with federal law and they refuse to be deported? What do you do with that? Like, it gets ugly, unfortunately. It will get ugly. Like, law enforcement in general is going to get ugly at times. And that doesn't mean you give up on the...
I have a question, question. I kept seeing the statistics on YouTube and stuff, all the talking heads, comparing how many people Obama deported, how many people Biden deported. They're like multiple times of what Trump has deported so far.
Yeah.
Yet, Trump's tactics or operations cause so much chaos and look so bad with protests and people getting hurt and killed. Whereas the administrations that deported multiple times of people, they didn't generate or create this kind of optics. How come?
I'm
missing something.
I've seen some of the certain commenters note that as well. That it's like, where were these ICE protests during Obama, during Biden, during?
You mean because they're not protesting? That's why things like that, ugly things like that didn't
Right.
happen.
You know, so, you know, and in fact, you had like,
see.
if you have a blue president,
That's a good explanation.
if you have a blue president and he wants to do some deportations in a blue state, they're not gonna oppose him. But it's Trump, so
Number
they have
one,
to
you don't
oppose
have-
him as like part of their DNA lizard brain instinct. You know, hamster wheel. That's what they have to do. So
Yeah, and you don't have those those people opposing, so you don't have those incidents. Number two, the thing went more smoothly. That's how you could get more efficient, deport more people more quietly, right?
I think Trump did make a mistake on, you know, being all flashy with it. I really do think he made that
Yeah,
mistake.
he make it like a campaign, a part of his
Like,
major thing, his
you know,
platform, and-
I don't know how much, I don't know what the ratio of blame should be, but Trump is not 0%
well,
blameless.
he had to do that. That's I don't know how many votes that translated into, but hey, you win first, then we worry about things later. Right? If you don't win the office, then the other things it's a moot point. So you got to win first.
There was there's a buddy of mine who his name is Lee, and he lives in Pennsylvania, and I sent him. You know, maybe he'll watch it, maybe he doesn't. I probably send him too much stuff. I sent him one of Nick's streams that I called the definitive statement on what's happening in Minnesota and the ICE protests, because I thought it was like both fantastic because he is a extremely gifted orator, but his points were on point as far as I could tell. Like he was laying it out point by point, and it was, to my mind, airtight. Now maybe I was taken in by the rhetoric and I was, you know, whatever, but. I thought it was absolutely perfect. It's like you have to be able to enforce the law. You can't just have this anarchy. You know, like you can't be armed, and then you know running up to ICE agents. You know, like this pretty guy or whoever he was.
Yeah,
like
pretty
or
guy,
something like.
yeah.
They actually prettied him up, and you know that was actually a little bit of a minor scandal. Is the news media prettied him up and made him look more handsome in the images. Compared to what he actually was, but that's a minor point. But it's like, you know, like, it's one thing if you're going to be armed at a protest, right? That's fine. In fact, Second Amendment, concealed carry, all that stuff, that's fine. But, like, if you're going to start doing things like resisting federal law enforcement while you're armed, like, there's an attorney that I think is pretty decent, Andrew Branca. And he's written a book. It's called The Law of Self-Defense Principles or something like that. And his book has been endorsed by Massad Ayub and someone else I can't remember, and John Lott, both of whom who have spoken at the Cato Institute, right? So just to establish a little bit of credentials and you know legitimacy by association, you know, if I can fallaciously go that way. And he's had some coverage of this, and you know he's broken down some of the legal principles because he's an attorney. He's broken down some of the legal principles of self-defense and how that works. And there's a couple of things that you need if you're just a regular citizen in order to prove self-defense that you don't actually need as a member of law enforcement, right? Like for example, you can't be the aggressor in order to claim, if you're going to claim self-defense, you can't have been the aggressor in some kind of altercation, right? By definition. On the other hand, if you're enforcing the law, the mechanics of it are, you probably are initiating physical aggression, like by trying to handcuff a person, trying to tell them to get out of the car, put your hands behind you, you know, all of the like physical mechanisms of enforcing the law, that is a kind of aggression, but like that kind of doesn't count because you're law enforcement. It's not like, oh, we're going to grant an unjust exemption to the government. It's like, no, the very nature of enforcing the law means this is like a non-applicable principle, right? You know, just as an example.
Sure.
So Andrew Branca, like he has some really good stuff. And there's like a debate that I'm going to watch when I get a chance between him and Nate the lawyer, because they're on either side. But you know, one of the things is it's just a matter of you have to be able to enforce the law. You can't you can't just like be resisting cops while you're armed, because what'll happen, you immediately escalate the chances that you are going to die.
That's a fact.
That's not to claim, and again, and that's not to claim like you deserve it. It's just a claim of like, no, there are things you can do that puts you in danger. That's the only claim. It's a value neutral claim.
Yeah, then we argue in court, but the reality is that you increase the chances that you're going to get shot.
Right, and so then the question becomes, like if you don't put these things down, that has a bad connotation. But like if you don't suppress these, like what look to me like insurrectionary actions, then you're giving up kind of on the rule of law to a certain extent. Like, you either have the law on the books and you're going to enforce it or you don't. Yeah. And the worst thing you can do is, we got too much pressure from people who are doing really insurrection-y type of stuff, and so we're going to pull back. Like, what? That's like, that's like giving into the demands of airplane hijackers. And they had a policy of you don't give them what they want. Because then what you do is you just incentivize them to hijack more planes.
Yeah, you're encouraging.
You're encouraging it. And it's just like, it's such a clear cut, and then the interesting thing too is like, this stuff isn't just organic. Not only is it funded, but like, I think government apparatus is involved with it. Like, they were talking about like James O'Keefe, James O'Keefe, right?
Yeah.
Project Veritas, O'Keefe Media Group, OMG. And I think somebody was driving around O'Keefe, and one of the things that they were doing, like, this is highly organized. There were zones where there would be spotters. This is like a military operation.
Right.
There would be spotters that were following around suspect, like cars with suspect license plates or whatever. And like the creepy thing was like it was either O'Keefe or the person who was in the car with O'Keefe driving O'Keefe, who got a text on the phone that said, "We know you are driving O'Keefe. You need to get the hell out." Like, it was from, the people, and it's like, how did you do that?
I think private citizen will have a way. I mean, that doesn't have to be like super conspiracy or network. If you're really into that stuff, you may be able to pull it off. I mean, really, realistically.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
maybe.
Of course, I'm not preclude that possibility. It's possible, but regardless, it can be done, and that's going too far. And they go to the ICE agents' hotel to break into their hotel or prevent them from getting arrested, at least, or they won't even break into just to get them. I mean, that's going too far. That's going beyond protest. It's like a new age of protest. Maybe that will be normalized. Maybe in the future that's not out of ordinary, but at this point it is. So that's where we're going. It's just like ridiculous, and this country will not be a country.
I mean, I think you can. I'm a little bit pessimistic on the prognosis for this country here, and indeed, I think it was like in 2004 when Vox Day was writing for the online for the website WorldNet Daily. I think it's roughly around 2004 when he first wrote something that referenced that he thought that the United States was going to cease to be the political entity that it is, like a breakup, a civil war, some kind of political realignment, roughly in the 2033 time frame, right? And he said when and he's over the years he's revisited that, and he hasn't changed his opinion, and he said, and
what's his name?
Vox Day.
Oh, okay.
VOXDAY.
Okay.
And he his real name is Theodore Beale.
Nice.
But Vox Day is what he goes by, so that's what I call him. It doesn't matter. And he's revisited it, and he in a relatively recent one within the last couple years. Yeah, I remember reading something where he wrote like, at first when I threw that out there, people thought I was crazy, it would never happen, and now people are telling me, no, I put it out too late, it's going to happen even sooner than when I predicted, so like there are a lot of more people are coming on his side, and it's just, when I see this stuff that just so clearly indicates the rot that I think is past the point of no return, things like, they're going to do an insurrection in Minnesota, and now we can't enforce immigration law in Minnesota. Like, you have stuff like in California where Gavin Newsom's state government passes a law that prohibits local jurisdictions from requiring identification to vote. Why would you do that?
It's the same thing here, Illinois.
Right. Why would you do that? But see, here's the thing. I don't know that that's the same thing here in Illinois because.
Well, I voted. They didn't ask for ID.
No.
I said, "How did you know it's me?" They say, "We have a way." Well, they checked your signature. I know that's there, but they were prohibited to request ID. That's my experience.
Well, okay. Here's what, but I think different jurisdiction, like different counties or different precincts, I don't think it's a uniform thing that every single district or jurisdiction in the state of Illinois is prohibited from asking for ID. I think some of them do, some of them don't, depending on where you are.
But the trend is that way.
Fine. But here's the point I'm making. California has taken it a step further, and they've passed legislation that prohibits any local jurisdiction from requiring ID. So, and in fact, and this was actually a response. I wrote a little bit about it in an email to somebody at one point last year. This was actually a response to the city of Huntington Beach in California. What they did is they didn't pass it wasn't a mere ordinance. They passed a charter amendment. So their basic, governing charter, they passed a charter amendment that required ID to be able to vote in the city of Huntington Beach. And it was in response to that, I think, or at least subsequent to that the state of California passed a law that says, no, you can't require ID to vote. Now, there's only one reason why you would ever do that. The reason you would do that is because you want to facilitate undetectable fraud. That's why you do that. Because if you have an anonymous ballot, once it's cast, you can't check that the person who voted should have been able to do it. And if you can't check ID, and this is something that I saw the stats from somewhere. It's 80-something% of Republicans think that you should have an ID to vote. And 60-something, 2/3 of Democrats roughly, it might have been 62, could have been 67, but let's say 2/3 of Democrats thought you should be required to have an ID to vote. So, yes, it's more heavily on the Republican side, but it's still a very clear, very major majority of Democrats who think you should furnish an ID to vote. But Democrat leadership disagrees with their Democratic constituents. Why?
Why?
Because they want to cheat. And making it so that you can't check ID makes it a lot easier to cheat. That's
for themselves or
for themselves, yes. For themselves. Right. For themselves. I would, I'm pretty sure if you're going to a hard red state, they're going to want IDs out the yin yang because they want to make sure that the result is legitimate. Right?
Yeah, if anything, you should present 2 pieces of ID.
You should present a blood sample.
Something like that,
yeah. No, not a blood sample, but
it's just like
something. I don't know.
That's what they did in Iraq. They said, I voted.
The purple finger, right.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think that should be done here.
And that's one of the arguments I'm having with my Pennsylvania friend. Is he's a lot more skeptical on the voter election fraud thing, especially with regards to 2020. And the thing that I've told a number of people is, there's all kinds of reasons for why I think it was stolen. If I could have the magical crystal ball of omniscience to give me the perfect, truthful answer no matter what the question was, and I asked it, was 2020 a stolen election in favor of Biden and against Trump? I'm pretty sure it would say yes, it was. But regardless, one of the things that I point out to people, they say, well, what's your evidence that it was stolen? And my response is, nope. Burden of proof is on the people who tell me what the election result is to prove that that's the legitimate result. And the reason why the burden of proof is on those people is because we have a system that I call intentionally non-transparent. It is non-transparent, and it is intentionally so. Anytime you have needless complexity and non-transparency, you're probably trying to hide something bad that you're doing.
Okay.
Or trying to make it easier to do something where you won't be detected, right?
But that rule, that they didn't establish that, or they didn't build that system. They inherited that system. But the person who won is still,
But
burden is still on him.
but even
to
if even if they didn't build that system,
Uh-huh.
and you inherited that system, you can still change it at any time. And so
Okay.
the fact that you don't is a choice you're making.
Okay,
Right.
you can argue that.
Yes, it's not an argument, it's just a fact. Now, one of the things I point out is, okay, so you got these, electronic voting machines, Dominion or Smartmatic or whatever, and, the ones where you tap the screen to click the name of the person you want to vote for, and it's like, okay, how do I know that it's legitimately tallying my vote the right way and not changing it in the software? How do I know that? I don't.
Right.
I have to have complete blind trust in a private company, and I don't know who they are. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what kind of, software this is. I don't know if the software is, maybe they're good people.